Chapter 240. Reading on the mobile phone, Lin Tian could feel the sorrow of the Supreme Elder and said, "Elder, don't blame yourself too much. This is not entirely your fault. Please search Tastebookia Network to see the most complete." He thought for a moment and said, "Moreover, although Master is addicted to drinking all day and is not serious, his cultivation is still very strong. It seems that he has not fallen behind much." The old man was stunned for a moment, then shook his head. "Compared to you, no matter how weak he is still in the airborne realm after all. You will naturally think that he is very strong." The old man said, "It's not like that. He is really very strong." Lin Tian said, "Before I came to the sect, I saw the Valley Master of the Valley of the Harp. That person fought with Master for a while. Later, he said that Master is no worse than you." Lin Tian felt that this Supreme Elder was quite good, and he was an old drunkard's master, so he did not hide this matter. "There is such a thing? The Valley Master of the Valley of the Harp you are talking about, is it that girl Yu Wuxuang?" The old man was shocked. Lin Tian was stunned. "Yu Wuxuang? It seems so." He did not know the name of the beautiful woman, but he suddenly remembered that Ji Yu called the beautiful woman Sister Yu. At first, thinking about it this way, the Yu Wuxuang that the old man was talking about should be the beautiful woman herself. Yu Wuxuang really said that Chang Feng is not worse than me? The old man's eyes were a little surprised. "Yes, she said so." Lin Tian now. Hearing Lin Tian's words, the old man looked even happier and could not help but laugh. Looking at Lin Tian, the old man said, "Little guy, I am 400 years old this year, and my cultivation is in the 9th tier of the airborne realm. Since that girl Yu Wuxuang said that Chang Feng is not weaker than me now, then Chang Feng should have at least reached the 8th tier of the airborne realm. Do you know that the current masters of the 4 major sects are only in the 3rd tier of the airborne realm?" "What?" This time, it was Lin Tian's turn to be surprised. An old drunkard had actually left the leaders of the 4 sects far behind him. The old man said, "In that case, if that incident hadn't happened, perhaps he would have reached the immortal connecting realm." Lin Tian was even more surprised. The Transcendence realm was a realm beyond the airborne realm. An old drunkard was highly anticipated. In any case, after hearing Lin Tian's words, the old man seemed to become more cheerful and told Lin Tian more things. "This is for you." After a few dozen breaths, the old man waved his hand and took out a baodan. Staring at this baodan, Lin Tian's spiritual sea shook slightly. He could clearly feel that this baodan was different. The old man smiled and said, "Spirit Forging Pill. Below the 5th layer of the sea of consciousness, after taking it, it can raise one's cultivation by one small level." Lin Tian was shocked. "Elder, this is too precious. Under the 5th layer of the sea of consciousness, it could directly raise one's cultivation by one small level. Such a pill was probably several times more precious than a high-grade supreme treasure. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was priceless. You are his disciple, and this is the first time we meet. I can't let you return empty-handed. Take it," the old man said. Lin Tian paused for a moment and finally took it. He said seriously, "Thank you, Elder. No problem. Find a place with abundant spirit chi to refine it. The Sex Dragon Spirit Valley is quite suitable," the old man said. Lin Tian was stunned. To refine this spirit forging pill, he needed to find a place with abundant spirit chi? As if seeing what Lin Tian was thinking, the old man said, "The spirit chi of heaven and earth runs through a cultivator's life. No matter what stage of cultivation one is at, even if one has reached the chaotic realm, they still need to absorb the spirit chi of heaven and earth. When refining pill treasures, the dense spirit chi surrounding them can make the absorption of pill treasures smoother." Lin Tian was surprised. There was such a thing. "Thank you for your guidance, Elder." He bowed. "This is nothing. Even if I don't say it now, you will feel it very soon. All right, let's stop here for today." The old man waved his hand and said to the Burning Sun sect leader, "Evergreen, send him back." "Yes." The Burning Sun sect leader walked over. Lin Tian was surprised. The Burning Sun sect leader's name was Evergreen, and an old drunkard's name was Eternal Wind. Could the two be brothers? Senior brother and I were brought back from outside the sect by Master. Our names were given to us by Master. The Burning Sun sect leader said. The old man said to Lin Tiandao, Little guy, cultivate well. Lin Tian nodded and left with the Burning Sun sect leader. It was the same path as before. Lin Tian followed behind the Burning Sun sect leader. He couldn't help but ponder. An old drunkard had such a past. No wonder he was hugging his wine gourd all day long. Thinking about it, he suddenly felt a little depressed. After all, an old drunkard was the one who introduced him to the sect. An old drunkard was his master. Lin Tian, what you said to Master just now, was it true? You Wushuang really said those words? The Burning Sun sect leader asked. Although the Burning Sun sect leader and Lin Tian were separated by a distance, they heard the two's words clearly. Indeed. Lin Tian nodded. The Burning Sun sect leader didn't know if he was happy or sad. He just sighed softly. Just like Master said, if it weren't for that matter, Senior Brother would have already entered the immortal realm. The Burning Sun sect leader said. Lin Tian didn't know what to say. He just silently followed behind the Burning Sun sect leader. After walking for a while, the Burning Sun sect leader stopped. Lin Tian hesitated for a moment before he stopped. Sect leader, what's wrong? He asked. The Burning Sun sect leader stared at Lin Tian with a slightly more solemn expression. Lin Tian, let me ask you something. When you fought by Yunfei before, at the final moment, the technique you used, was it the 100 Refinements secret technique of the 100 Refinements workshop? It wasn't. Lin Tian shook his head. It really wasn't? It really wasn't. Lin Tian said seriously. Okay, since you say it wasn't, then I believe you. The Burning Sun sect leader nodded. Lin Tian frowned. Is the 100 Refinements secret technique really that powerful? He felt that it was somewhat strange. He had heard that each of the 4 great schools had a secret technique. The Burning Sun sect was naturally no exception. But now, even the Burning Sun sect leader was so serious when talking about the 100 Refinements secret technique. This made him very surprised. Naturally. When this technique is practiced to the extreme, one can control 49 weapons at the same time. It's extremely terrifying. It's the foundation of the 100 Refinements workshop. It can be said that among the 4 great schools' secret techniques, the 100 Refinements secret technique is the strongest. The Burning Sun sect leader paused for a moment, then said, Of course, this doesn't mean that those who practice the 100 Refinements secret technique are the strongest in the same realm. After all, in a real battle, the strength of the technique isn't the only thing that matters. More importantly, it depends on the person using the technique. Lin Tian nodded. He naturally understood this. At this time, he was thinking about another matter. He also had some doubts about this matter because on the surface, the 100 Refinements secret technique was very similar to the weapon control technique he practiced. It could be said that they were exactly the same. But after listening to the Burning Sun sect leader's words, he could clearly distinguish between the two techniques. The weapon control technique was stronger. After all, the 100 Refinements secret technique could at most control 49 weapons at the same time, while the weapon control technique had no upper limit. When practiced to the extreme, it was said that everything in the world could be one's divine weapon, including the enemy's weapon and even the enemy's body. Looking at it this way, the 100 Refinements secret technique was simply an extremely small branch of the weapon control technique. What's wrong? The Burning Sun sect leader noticed the change in Lin Tian's expression. Nothing. Lin Tian hurriedly shook his head. The Burning Sun sect leader thought that Lin Tian was worried about the 100 Refinements workshop, so he patted Lin Tian's shoulder and said, You don't have to worry about the 100 Refinements workshop. No matter what, the sect will stand by your side. After saying this, the Burning Sun sect leader once again took a step forward and said, Right, don't tell anyone about the meeting with the Grand Elder. Yes, I understand. Lin Tian Andao. The Burning Sun sect leader smiled and said, Also, remember one thing. Although you're senior brother's disciple, we won't give you any special privileges in the sect. If you want something, you'll have to fight for it yourself. We will only give you firm support when the forces outside the sect threaten you. Do you understand? Understood. Lin Tian said seriously. He was already very grateful for the sect's kind intentions. All right, go. I won't continue to send you off. Cultivate well and don't disappoint senior brother, the Burning Sun sect leader said. Lin Tian nodded and bowed to the Burning Sun sect leader before leaving. Looking at Lin Tian's departing figure, the Burning Sun sect leader's face was full of smiles. This young man's personality was similar to senior brother's, and his aptitude was also as monstrous. After bidding farewell to the Burning Sun sect leader, Lin Tian followed the path the Burning Sun sect leader took up to the mountain and quickly returned to his residence. After calming down, Lin Tian couldn't help but think of an old drunkard. Back then, an old drunkard's most beloved person had died. He thought about it. If one day, Jiyu or Sushu suddenly died, he would definitely be like an old drunkard, or even more dispirited than an old drunkard. After all, they were the most important people to him. I didn't expect that old man to be so infatuated. Even after 100 years, he still couldn't forget her. He muttered to himself. Taking a deep breath, he shook his head and calmed himself down. Wang! A faint silver radiance swirled out and enveloped his entire body. At this moment, he began to circulate the four extremities scripture, causing the inner energy in his body to flow through bit by bit, tempering his flesh and organs while simultaneously consolidating his cultivation. On this day, Lin Tian didn't go out again. He only opened his door the next day. Facing the morning sun, he breathed in and out for a while, then washed up and walked out of his residence. Yesterday, he had obtained a soul-forging pill from the Grand Elder. He had spent an entire night consolidating his cultivation and sorting out his blood so that he could refine this bowed end today and enter the third celestial realm in one fell swoop. At this time, he left his residence, closed the door, and walked towards the Dragon Spirit Valley on the west side of the sect. Lin Tian is here! That Lin Tian? That Lin Tian! The Lin Tian who defeated Bai Yunfei of the 100 Refinements Workshop. Someone emphasized. Looking at Lin Tian, many of the disciples had a look of reverence on their faces. Seeing Lin Tian walk over, many of them immediately made way for Lin Tian. Lin Tian was more or less speechless, but he didn't say anything and walked calmly in a direction. Chapter 241. Lin Tian took out his golden medallion and handed it over to the two attendants standing guard outside the Dragon's Spirit Valley. The two attendants were surprised to see that Lin Tian had defeated Bai Yunfei from the 100 Refinements Workshop. 90% of the people in the Burning Sun sect knew about it, and these two attendants had seen Lin Tian's strength with their own eyes. None popped up. Let's go in. One of the attendants spoke. Lin Tian was far stronger than them in terms of strength. Lin Tian nodded. Taking back his golden medallion, he walked in. The Dragon Spirit Valley was roughly 300 meters in diameter. Compared to the pulse condensation cave of the Northern Flame Imperial Academy, this place was many times larger. Lin Tian could feel the rich spiritual energy in the valley as soon as he stepped in. It was at least 10 times stronger than the spiritual energy in the outside world. The pulse condensation cave of the Northern Flame Imperial Academy couldn't even begin to compare. That's Lin Tian! The Dragon Spirit Valley didn't have any special restrictions for the disciples of the Burning Sun sect. Any disciple of the Burning Sun sect could enter the valley to train at any time. Quite a few outer school disciples were gathered in the Dragon Spirit Valley at this time. When they saw Lin Tian enter the valley, they all looked at him with shock. Some looked at him with respect, some looked at him with fear. Lin Tian was calm. Ever since he started cultivating, he'd gotten used to this kind of look. Pausing for a moment, he scanned his surroundings. Soon, he arrived at an old rock next to an evergreen tree. The spiritual energy here was the strongest. That's. Many people's expressions changed when they saw Lin Tian walking over. However, at this moment, Lin Tian had already closed his eyes. Because of how rich the spiritual energy here was, Lin Tian was able to enter a state of emptiness. His four extremities meridians were able to circulate twice as smoothly as before. Just like that, a quarter of an hour later, Lin Tian opened his eyes once more, and his essence, energy, and spirit had risen to his current peak state. Looking around, Lin Tian carefully took out a small jade bottle. Inside it was a pill the size of a thumb. Spirit Forging Pill. The surface of the Spirit Forging Pill was light silver and emitted a faint fragrance. Lin Tian took a deep breath and carefully placed the pill into his mouth. As soon as it entered his mouth, the Spirit Forging Pill melted like snow. However, what surprised Lin Tian was that after the Spirit Forging Pill melted, it melted into the flesh in his mouth and gathered in his knowledge sea. This is the Forging Spirit Pill! It is indeed different! Lin Tian was secretly shocked. At this moment, he felt that there was an additional source of fire in his knowledge sea. His knowledge sea was like a pot placed on top of a fire source, and his spiritual energy was like the water in the pot. This source of fire was heating up the spiritual energy in his knowledge sea, causing it to boil and shatter the impurities in his spiritual energy little by little. Gradually, he felt his divine sense becoming purer and purer. Lin Tian was a little surprised. He didn't expect the Spirit Forging Pill to have such an effect. He calmed down and circulated his four extremities meridians even faster in the vast spiritual energy of the Dragon's Spirit Valley. After this, he felt the spiritual energy around him gathering towards him. It was like a small stream flowing into the sea, entering his body through his pores. Wang! A faint glow flashed and Lin Tian's forehead lit up again, becoming brighter and brighter. Moreover, at this moment, Lin Tian felt indescribably comfortable. As time passed, the light between his brows grew brighter and brighter, and it became purer and purer. This caused his perception of the surroundings to skyrocket. Lin Tian was pleasantly surprised by this. Continue, Lin Tian said to himself. Spiritual sense energy was the same as a cultivator's body, it also had impurities. The cultivation of the sea of consciousness was to constantly temper the sea of consciousness, making the sea of consciousness bigger and making the spiritual sense energy within it purer. To a certain extent, this was similar to the cultivation of the physique. The only difference was that the cultivation of the sea of consciousness was far more difficult than the cultivation of the physique. Lin Tian calmed his mind and focused. Light flashed between his brows. The divine sense in his sea of knowledge boiled like boiling water. Strands of filthy air rose into the air, and then disappeared. Although Lin Tian was cultivating, he could clearly see this scene. His heart was moved. Wang! At this moment, not only did the light between his brows appear, but even the outside of his body was shining brightly. This feeling, is this divine sense? So powerful! Someone passed by and was shocked when they felt the ripples on Lin Tian's body. Lin Tian felt the presence of these people, but he did not care. He focused all of his attention on his sea of knowledge. As the effects of the Forging Spirit Pill took effect, the surrounding heaven and earth spirit chi began to madly converge into his body. This allowed him to cultivate his divine sense in an orderly manner, and it became faster and faster. 1 hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, time flew by. After 4.5 hours, the light between Lin Tian's brows became as pure as the moonlight. Moreover, the aura on his body also changed. It was more intimidating, as if it had become much weaker. Some of the onlookers in the distance were shocked and showed an expression of disbelief. After another 10 breaths, Lin Tian opened his eyes. 2 rays of light flashed in his eyes. In the distance, some of the onlookers who looked at Lin Tian suddenly felt a chill run down their backs. It was as if they had been seen through. This feeling is really evil! Someone shuddered. Lin Tian looked around, then closed his eyes again. After the tempering of his sea of knowledge by the Forging Spirit Pill, his sea of knowledge had become more stable and vast. His divine sense had also become many times stronger. It was also because of this that he had stepped into the third layer of his sea of knowledge in just a few hours. He felt that all aspects of his sea of knowledge had improved by leaps and bounds. At this moment, he closed his eyes and channeled the 4 extreme scriptures, absorbing heaven and earth's spirit chi from all directions to consolidate his sea of knowledge third layer. The Grand Elder is right. Heaven and earth's spirit chi runs through a cultivator's life. No matter the time, no matter the realm, no matter where, heaven and earth's spirit chi is a very important existence. It has an irreplaceable meaning. After several hours of cultivation, the heaven and earth spirit chi in the Dragon's Spirit Valley had entered his body. This made him realize this point. Before this, he thought that heaven and earth spirit chi was not that important after reaching the Sea of Knowledge realm. But now, he knew that he had misunderstood. Heaven and earth spirit chi was very important no matter the realm. A small amount of heaven and earth spirit chi might not mean much, but when the amount of heaven and earth spirit chi gathered together to a certain extent, it could be used like the forging spirit pill. It could be used to raise a cultivator's cultivation by a small level, or even a few small levels. Even for those in the chaos realm, the prerequisite was that the heaven and earth spirit chi gathered together was dense enough. After another 2 hours, Lin Tian opened his eyes again. Phew! Letting out a breath of turbid air, he stood up and walked out of the Dragon's Spirit Valley. After 2 hours, he felt that he had reached the Sea of Knowledge. This chapter is not finished, please turn the page. His realm stabilized a little. After leaving the Dragon's Spirit Valley, he returned to his residence, washed up, and lay down to rest. Because he had been cultivating the weapon-controlling art, he had not rested much. Plus, after what had happened in the past 2 days, he was more or less tired. Although he was a cultivator, he was not made of steel. Too little rest was not enough. Just like that, the night passed quickly. The next day, Lin Tian woke up early and came to the Dragon's Spirit Valley again. He sat down cross-legged and cultivated in the same spot as yesterday. Having just entered the 3rd level of the spiritual sea, it was a good choice to use the dense heaven and earth spirit chi here to stabilize his realm. He chose that place again. Many people were moved. Many people were standing far away, but they were all looking at Lin Tian's position with strange expressions on their faces. Although Lin Tian's eyes were closed, he was naturally able to observe the expressions of these people with his current spiritual sense. He felt a little strange about this. These people gave him the feeling that he was occupying a position that he could not occupy. He thought for a moment, then shook his head. When he came, there was no one here. After calming himself down, Lin Tian channeled the 4 extreme meridians. Silver light flashed around his body. Almost at the same time, a handsome young man stepped into the Dragon's Spirit Valley. Core disciple, Ling Yi. That's Elder Tu's disciple. Didn't he go out to train? He's been out for 2.5 months. What's so strange about him coming back at this time? In the Burning Sun sect, after the outer and inner disciples left the sect, they had to return within a month. Otherwise, they would be severely punished. However, it was different for the core disciples. Every year, the core disciples had a chance to stay outside the sect for 3 months. Ling Yi was one of the 4 core disciples of the Burning Sun sect. Not long ago, he went out to train. It had been almost 3 months, and now he was back in the sect. Ling Yi was about 20 years old. His expression was cold as he walked towards a direction in the Dragon's Spirit Valley. Many people's expressions changed when they saw this. That Lin Tian seems to be occupying that spot. I thought it would be a while before Ling Yi came back. I didn't expect him to come back now. If Ling Yi finds out that someone is occupying the spot he usually uses to cultivate, I'm afraid. Many people were moved. At this time, Ling Yi had already walked far away. After turning a corner, Ling Yi quickly arrived in front of an evergreen tree. Instantly, his expression darkened. In the entire Burning Sun sect, who didn't know that this was his exclusive cultivation area? Usually, no one dared to come close. Even the other 3 core disciples wouldn't come here to cultivate. But now, in front of him, there was someone sitting cross-legged on that old rock. Moreover, it didn't seem like this person's first time here. Ling Yi! In the distance, many people stared at Ling Yi and then looked at Lin Tian on the old rock. They couldn't help but tremble. Ling Ye's eyes turned cold. He walked step by step to the old rock and coldly looked down at Lin Tian. Lin Tian naturally felt Ling Ye's aura. He opened his eyes and frowned. "What's the matter?" he asked. "You're cultivating in my domain. Tell me, what's the matter?" Ling Yi said coldly. End of chapter. Chapter 242. Lin Tian was a little displeased. He had never heard that there was a personal domain in Dragon's Spirit Valley. Full text to read. "Don't bother me if there's nothing," he said. Ling Ye's eyes immediately turned colder, and a majestic aura came out of his body. Lin Tian frowned slightly. He immediately sensed that Ling Yi was not simple. He seemed to be much stronger than Bai Yunfei. He was actually at the 5th level of the mindscape. But even so, Ling Yi did not give him much pressure. After all, he was now at the 3rd level of the mindscape. He was only 2 levels away from Ling Yi. Staring at Ling Yi, his expression also darkened. "Get out of my domain!" Ling Yi said. Lin Tian stood up. Because he was sitting cross-legged on the stone to cultivate, when he stood up, it was his turn to look down at Ling Yi. "I'll say it again. Don't bother me!" As he stared at Ling Yi, he could naturally feel that the other party did not have the slightest bit of goodwill. Towards people who came with ill intentions, he would usually not give them a good look. Ling Yi did not seem to like the feeling of being looked down at. With a slight leap, he jumped onto the stone and looked at Lin Tian from half a foot away. His eyes were as sharp as knives. Immediately! Immediately! Get off this stone platform! Reason! Lin Tian now. This is my domain! Ling Yi was very domineering. Your domain? The Dragon Spirit Valley was a cultivation ground shared by all sections. Since when was it allowed to have its own territory? Who do you think you are? Lin Tianling laughed. I kind of understand why no one has come here to cultivate even though the spiritual energy here is so dense. It's because you've taken over this place. So what? Ling Yi said. Nothing. Lin Tian now said. I hate people like you the most, scum. With that, he waved his hand and slapped Ling Ye's face. Because he had always used the 4 extreme scriptures to forge his body, his current physique could be said to be astonishingly strong. It was enough to be comparable to an expert at the 7th layer of the Sea of Consciousness. With such a slap, it caused the air to buzz. This slap was too sudden, causing Ling Ye's expression to change. As a core disciple, he clearly did not expect that there would actually be someone who dared to take the initiative to attack him in the sect. Moreover, the aura of this slap also caused him to be shocked. It actually caused the air to vibrate. In this hurry, he could only raise his arms to block. Bang! With a crisp sound, Ling Yi was sent flying, crashing heavily into a nearby valley wall. In the distance, the people who were watching this scene all felt their hearts tremble. They all retreated, fearing that they would be affected. This ruthless person really dares to attack. Doesn't he know that he is a core disciple? Ling Yi just came back. He probably doesn't know this. Even if he knows, with that ruthless person's character, it seems like he will slap him. After all, not long ago, he directly invited the sect's deacon to the life and death arena. Many people whispered. Boom! A majestic wave of true origin energy rippled from afar. The valley wall of the Dragon's Spirit Valley was shattered quite a bit. Ling Yi stood up. Staring at Lin Tian again, Ling Ye's eyes were like that of a venomous snake. Cold, domineering, and self-centered. You think that the whole world should listen to you. That's the kind of person who describes you. You've circled an area within the sect's cultivation area, and that's your domain? Do you think that you are the sect leader of the Burning Sun sect or the Grand Elder of the sect? What a disgrace! Lin Tian mocked. Many people around felt their teeth ache when they heard Lin Tian's words. How could he say something like that? Ling Ye's face clearly became distorted. An extremely dangerous aura was emitted. It was as if a gale had swept up in the Dragon Spirit Valley, causing many disciples to change their expressions. Then, below. In the next moment, everyone saw a beam of light charging towards Lin Tian. It almost instantly arrived in front of Lin Tian. So fast. Someone's heart palpitated. This beam of light was naturally Ling Yi. Ling Yi appeared in front of Lin Tian and directly grabbed Lin Tian's neck. You're still far from being able to compete with me in terms of speed, Lin Tianling said. He raised his hand and grabbed Ling Ye's outstretched wrist. At this moment, Ling Ye's other hand slapped down. It was a hand blade causing the air to hiss. Spiritual sea-level martial technique, 100 palms slash. Someone exclaimed. Lin Tian felt a terrifying fluctuation, but his expression didn't change. He waved his right hand and used the shattering meteorite fist to meet this divine pulse realm martial technique. With a bang, the fist and palm collided. The true origin energy enveloping Ling Ye's palm was instantly dispersed. Of course, at the same time, Lin Tian's right hand was also rebounded. Ling Yi waved his hand, and a long sword appeared and slashed at Lin Tian. Clang! The sound of the sword was ear-piercing, mixed with a strong flame fluctuation. Lin Tian's face turned cold. He pulled out his inner spirit sword and slashed forward. The two swords collided with a loud clang, and a violent sword wind wantonly swept out in all directions. Ling Ye's face was cold, and at the same time, he was a little surprised. He knew all the disciples of the Burning Sun sect who had a certain level of strength, but he couldn't remember this person in front of him who was so powerful. Who are you? The one who beat you up, Lin Tianling said coldly. As he spoke, he kicked out. He really couldn't stand this Ling Yi. He actually encircled the territory in the Dragon Spirit Valley and occupied the place with the densest spirit chi. Even if he didn't use it himself, he didn't allow others to use it either. This behavior made him extremely angry. He had been cultivating diligently just now, but he was interrupted by Ling Yi, who even told him to get lost. How could he still have a good temper? Ling Ye's face was cold, and he also kicked out. Bang! 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 The two of them kept kicking and colliding. Wave after wave of true origin energy fluctuations spread out. Many people around them were shocked by this. That Lin Tian is already so strong that he can block that Ling Yi. Nonsense, if he can defeat that Bai Yunfei, blocking Ling Yi won't be a problem. What are you looking at? Looking at it now, that Ling Yi is the one who's at a disadvantage, someone whispered. To be honest, many people in the Burning Sun sect were naturally unhappy with Ling Ye's arrogance and domineering. He occupied the place with the densest spirit chi in the Dragon Spirit Valley, and didn't allow anyone to come close. It was really too much. However, even though they were unhappy with Ling Yi, his strength was still there. In the world of cultivators where the strong were respected, they could only remain silent. Now that Lin Tian had made such a powerful move, it naturally made many people feel good in their hearts. What are you doing? Stop it! Suddenly, a voice rang out. The two deacons guarding the Dragon Spirit Valley noticed that there was a huge disturbance in the Dragon Spirit Valley and ran in to check. When they saw Lin Tian and Ling Yi fighting, they immediately stopped them. However, the two deacons' expressions were a little stiff. After all, the two people fighting in front of them weren't people to be trifled with, so they looked helpless. Lin Tian frowned. His inner spirit sword paused for a moment, and was about to withdraw it. In the Burning Sun sect, the deacons of the various cultivation areas were mainly responsible for maintaining order in the cultivation areas. Although Lin Tian didn't like Ling Yi, he didn't want to make things difficult for the two deacons here, so he chose to temporarily stop. Clang! An even more shocking sword sound rang out. Ling Ye's sword didn't slow down, and instead became even more terrifying. This chapter isn't finished yet, please turn the page. It became even more terrifying. Instantly, Lin Tian's expression turned cold. You don't want face when I'm giving you face. With a clang, he fiercely shook his inner spirit sword, and the azure thunder sword flew towards Ling Yi. Boom! The two swords collided, and powerful true essence fluctuations intertwined. It was extremely terrifying. At this moment, Ling Yi had already broken free from Lin Tian's wrist. Holding the sword with both hands, he slashed out, and 100 swords fell. Moreover, this sword light carried an extremely hot air current, causing the air to distort. It was extremely terrifying. Lin Tian was naturally fearless. With a flip of his wrist, the inner spirit sword slashed out diagonally. Clang! 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 The two of them continued to collide. The sword light swept across the surroundings, causing a lot of damage to the dragon's spirit valley. Do you want to destroy this place? Who can bear the responsibility? One of the deacons shouted. Hearing this, Lin Tian frowned. Even Ling Yi stopped. There were many spirit veins gathered under the dragon's spirit valley. If they were damaged because of the battle, it would be a big deal. After all, this was the sect of an old drunkard. An old drunkard's master and junior brother were all important figures in the sect. Lin Tian stopped attacking. He glanced at Ling Yi indifferently and walked out of the dragon's spirit valley. There were many sect disciples standing in front. When they saw Lin Tian walking over, they immediately made a path for him. The two deacons heaved a sigh of relief. They were more or less grateful that Lin Tian was willing to stop. Ling Yi stared at Lin Tian's back, but his eyes were filled with coldness. After leaving the dragon's spirit valley, Lin Tian walked around the celestial river pagoda. As he expected, he could now reach the 3rd floor of the celestial river pagoda. The celestial river on the 3rd floor was much more spectacular than the 2nd floor. Of course, the pressure was also much greater. Lin Tian cultivated in the celestial river pagoda for more than 12 hours before returning to his residence. At this time, the sky was already dark. Lin Tian stuck a spiritual refining rune between his eyebrows and continued to cultivate in the spiritual sea realm. Although he was cultivating in the spiritual sea realm, Lin Tian also activated 3 spiritual gathering runes at the same time, causing the spiritual chi of heaven and earth and the power of the stars to continuously gather in his residence. Although he was cultivating in the spiritual sea, the spiritual chi and the power of the stars were still useful. Soon the night passed. This morning, Lin Tian woke up a little later than usual. Because there were not many spiritual refining runes left, he engraved another 10 runes. At noon, he swallowed a fasting pill and headed to the Dragon's Spirit Valley to prepare for a new day of cultivation. Lin Tian. A voice sounded, and Su Feng trotted over from afar. Lin Tian was stunned and stopped. Senior brother. Su Feng stopped and took a few breaths. Deacon Puan wants you to go to the Deacon Hall. What is it? Lin Tian was curious. I'm not sure. You'll know when you get there, Su Feng said. Lin Tian nodded and said goodbye to Su Feng. Soon, he arrived at the Deacon Hall. Little guy, you're here. Puan greeted him with a smile. I heard that you had a little conflict with Ling Yi yesterday. How was it? Did you lose out? Do I look like someone who would lose out? Lin Tian andal. He had been in the sect for some time and was very familiar with Puan. When they talked, he was more casual. Puan smiled. You really don't? Then Puan said, Okay, let's get down to business. Our Burning Sun sect and the Valley of the Harp have always had a good relationship. Every year, we will send disciples to each other's sects to exchange cultivation and battle experiences with the other's outstanding disciples. It just so happens that this year, it's our Burning Sun sect's turn to visit the Valley of the Harp. There are a total of 10 candidates, and you are one of them. The sect master specially appointed you. End of chapter. Chapter 243. Reading on a mobile phone. Lin Tian was stunned. Visit the Valley of the Harp? Exchanges on cultivation and combat? Does this happen every year? He asked. Puan grunted. Every year. Understood. Lin Tian nodded. Thinking about it, The Burning Sun sect master probably knew that he had some relationship with the Valley of the Harp, so he let him go. He was naturally very happy about this. After all, Jiyu was in the Valley of the Harp. After going to the Valley of the Harp, he would be able to see Jiyu again. Thinking about it, they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Who else is there? He asked Puin. The candidates are roughly 9 inner disciples. Apart from you, there are 8 others. As for the last person. Speaking up to here, Puin chuckled. The last person is the core disciple Ling Yi. Moreover, this time, Ling Yi will be leading the team. In other words, he will be your captain and can order you around. He can order me around, and I can refuse to listen, Lin Tiantan said calmly. Puin laughed. I knew you would say that. Waving his hand, Puin said, All right, that's about it. Tomorrow morning, we will set off at the foot of the mountain. The round trip will take about 10 days. Go back and prepare well. Oh, how should I put it? On the way, don't mess with that Ling Yi anymore. I will try my best. Lin Tian now. Puin smiled bitterly. Go. It seemed that the journey wouldn't be peaceful. Lin Tian nodded and walked out of the duty hall. Walking in the sect, Lin Tian couldn't help but smile. Because soon, he would be able to see Jiyu again. After cultivating hard for so long, he could go out and see the important girl. He was very much looking forward to it. It was currently noon, so Lin Tian didn't continue cultivating. After pondering for a moment, he arrived at the demon's ceiling gorge and charged towards its depths. In the blink of an eye, he utilized the artifact control technique and quickly arrived within 80,000 feet of the gorge. Following a certain direction, he released his divine sense and soon found 5 return essence bears. Found it. Lin Tianyi smiled. The flaming thunder sword was unsheathed, and the weapon controlling art was activated. Immediately, 15 swords flew out at the same time. The flaming thunder sword she also flew out in all directions. Not long after, 5 origin returning bears were lying in a pool of blood one after another. Lin Tian spat out a mouthful of turbid air. After his cultivation base had reached the 3rd layer of the Sea of Consciousness, his battle prowess had increased by a lot. After using the weapon controlling art, the 8th grade demonic beast, the origin returning bear, seemed to be a little weak. Fighting against 5 origin returning bears together, he didn't feel the slightest bit of pressure. Lin Tian extracted the essence blood of the 5 origin returning bears and took out their beast cores. Then, he turned around and left. Not long after, he found many moonlight birds in another old forest. He directly used the weapon control technique from a long distance, and killed a few of them in an instant. He walked over and took out the brains and beast cores of the moonlight birds. Then, he rode on the long sword and returned to the sect. After returning to his residence, the sky gradually darkened. Lin Tian took out the clear heart grass and clear spirit stone from the stone ring and began to inscribe the divine refining rune. He thought that Jiyu should have also stepped into the Sea of Consciousness realm. With the help of the divine refining rune, the Sea of Consciousness realm's cultivation speed could be increased by 3 times. He prepared to inscribe some divine refining runes for Jiyu. In this way, the night passed very quickly. The next day, the sky was bright. Lin Tian washed up and tidied himself up. After closing the door, he walked down the mountain. When he arrived at the foot of the mountain, there were already several disciples waiting there. They were roughly at the 2nd layer of the Sea of Consciousness realm, and their qi and blood were very vigorous. Good morning, Brother Lin. Seeing Lin Tian, several people took the initiative to greet him. Now, Lin Tian's fame had spread throughout the entire Burning Sun sect. Facing Lin Tian, these people were very friendly. Good morning, senior brothers, Lin Tian replied. Others treated him with respect, so of course, he would not be arrogant. The group of people waited at the foot of the mountain. Soon an hour passed. At this time, the 9 inner disciples, including Lin Tian, had already appeared. They greeted each other and chatted casually. Then time passed. Another hour passed, and it was almost noon. Why hasn't senior brother Ling come yet? Maybe something came up. Okay. Not long after, another hour and a half passed. At this time, noon had already passed, but Ling Yi still had not appeared. It's about time to put on airs. That's right. It's already been 6 hours. Do you want us to wait for a whole day? Bear with it. No matter what, he's still a core disciple. Someone said. These people were all inner disciples and knew Ling Yi very well. They knew that Ling Yi was deliberately delaying his arrival. Lin Tian stood quietly at the side. At this time, when he heard the other 8 people's discussion, his face suddenly showed some mockery. Letting others wait for him, and then he would appear in the end to establish his own status? Thinking about it, it was really childish. He stared into the distance. His inner spirit sword shook, and he directly used the weapon Imperial technique. Brother Lin, you're... The 8 people were shocked. Sorry, I'll go first. Lin Tian Andal. He naturally knew the location of the Valley of the Harp. He could reach it alone. He was not willing to wait here foolishly for Ling Yi. Whoosh! The inner spirit sword drew a sword mark, and Lin Tian instantly went far away. Staring at this scene, the 8 people could not help but stare. He actually did not wait for the leader of the core disciples and went first. Sure enough, it's the style of that ruthless person. Someone muttered. Time ticked by. Soon, another 2 hours had passed. On the stone steps leading to the Burning Sun sect, a young man slowly walked down. It was Ling Yi. Ling Ye's expression was indifferent. When he came in front of them and swept his gaze, his face immediately darkened. This time, he was the leader of the team to the Valley of the Harp. He naturally knew who was going, and Lin Tian was among them. He deliberately delayed for a few hours before coming, but he did not expect that Lin Tian was even later than him. He actually had not arrived yet. Go and call Lin Tian for me. Who does he think he is to make all of us wait for him alone? Ling Yi said with a cold face. The 8 people looked at each other, and no one moved. Don't you understand my words? Ling Yi said coldly. That's senior brother Ling. An inner disciple said. Lin Tian has already left. Ling Ye's face immediately changed. It was gloomy, ashen, and even a little purple. He deliberately delayed for a few hours to come here. When he saw that Lin Tian was not here, his face was gloomy. He thought that Lin Tian had not arrived yet, which made him very angry. A mere member of the core disciples actually came later than him, the leader. But then, the real result made him even angrier. Lin Tian did not come late, but directly left. He actually did not wait for him, the leader, and left. Arrogant. Roaring angrily, Ling Yi shook his sword and instantly flew away at an extremely fast speed. The 8 disciples looked at each other, and each used the Imperial armament technique to follow. At this time, in another place, the 100 Refinements Workshop. The 100 Refinements Workshop was filled with pavilions and surrounded by tall mountains. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the school was very dense. A furious roar rang out in the mountains, and the murderous aura was terrifying. Several days later, Bai Yunfei returned to the 100 Refinements Workshop just in time for Mu Hong to come out of his closed-door meditation. Bai Yunfei told him about Mu Haoguang's death. His only grandson's death had caused Mu Hong's eyes to go red. His elemental energy had destroyed everything within a 15-meter radius, and the terrifying murderous aura had caused many people to tremble in fear. A few days ago, your disciple went to the Burning Sun sect to ask for the murderer, but I returned without success. Bai Yunfei spoke carefully. But Master, your disciple discovered something else. The one who killed Haoguang, Lin Tian, seems to have a technique similar to the 100 refinements. He can control even more weapons than your disciple, 15 of them. Bai Yunfei explained the battle in detail. What? Mu Hong's murderous aura had been thick at first, but when he heard Bai Yunfei's words, his face paled. The aura Mu Hong was exuding right now was even more frightening than before. Bai Yunfei began to describe the scene of Lin Tian using the 15 Saint Armament swords to Bai Yunfei. Is what you say true? Mu Hong stared at Bai Yunfei. Absolutely true. Your disciple wouldn't dare lie to you, master. The other juniors saw it as well, Bai Yunfei hurriedly replied. Mu Hong clenched his fists tightly, his eyes filled with murderous intent and shock. Staring at Bai Yunfei, Mu Hong spoke again. Is there anyone in the Burning Sun sect who wants Lin Tian dead? Bai Yunfei was confused, but he didn't dare hesitate. There is. Attendants was Shang and inner disciple Chu Xian. Mu Hong nodded and disappeared in a flash. Bai Yunfei was surprised to see Mu Hong disappear. What's going on? Master is more concerned about Lin Tian using the 100 refinements than his own grandson being killed. This? Bai Yunfei didn't understand. The 100 refinements was important to the Burning Sun sect, but shouldn't his grandson be more important? At this time, Mu Hong arrived at a magnificent hall in the back mountains of the 100 refinements workshop. There were 5 other people in the hall, all of them exuding an extremely powerful aura. One of them was an elder whose entire body was incomparably sharp, like an unsheathed celestial sword. It was extremely frightening. Mu Hong, what's the matter? Why did you invite the esteemed elder? One of them asked. This middle-aged man was the current owner of the 100 Refinements workshop. It's very important, Mu Hong spoke in a low voice. Mu Hong immediately described what Bai Yunfei had seen in detail. Everyone's expression changed at once. The 100 Refinements secret technique is merely an incomplete scroll that the old ancestor accidentally found back then. At least 90% of it is missing. It is incomplete. In the history of the 100 Refinements workshop, only the elders, the sect master, and the grand elders are qualified to know about this. The 100 Refinements workshop's grand elder said, We can be certain that the 100 Refinements secret technique in the sect has never been leaked. In that case, it is very likely that the young man called Lin Tian possesses the complete secret technique. At this time, this person's eyes became even more oppressive, and his aura became even more terrifying. The owner of the 100 Refinements workshop said in a low voice, This Lin Tian must be captured. Since he possesses the technique of that level and defeated Yunfei, then those old fogies of the Burning Sun sect will very likely do everything in their power to protect him. If we want to capture him, then we'll need to plan this matter thoroughly, an elder said. According to Yunfei, there are 2 people in the Burning Sun sect who want Lin Tian dead. Perhaps we can use them, Mu Hong said. Very good. Mu Hong, have Yunfei communicate with those 2 people from the Burning Sun sect and have them help our 100 Refinements workshop. No matter what benefits they promise, it's fine. If this matter succeeds, I will let Yunfei be the next owner of the 100 Refinements workshop. The esteemed elder of the 100 Refinements workshop said. If they could find the complete version of the 100 Refinements workshop, it would be 100 times stronger in a short period of time. Understood. Mu Hong nodded. The eyes of the 6 airborne realm beings in the hall glittered with brilliance. Time passed very quickly. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. Chapter 244. Reading on mobile phone. Towering pavilions stood in the valley. From afar, it looked like a celestial court. This feeling was similar to when Lin Tian saw the Burning Sun sect for the first time. Please search product #book net to see the most complete. Fortunately, Lin Tian had already seen the Burning Sun sect, so he was not too surprised by the scene in front of him. Valley of the Harp, here we are, he said to himself. This place was still some distance away from the Valley of the Harp. Lin Tian jumped down from the Soul Sword and walked forward. This place was already close to the Valley of the Harp. Naturally, he would not continue to use the Imperial Equipment technique. This would seem disrespectful to the Valley of the Harp. His steps were gentle. Soon, he was close to the Valley of the Harp. At this moment, in the distant sky, a beam of light fell, and a figure stood in front of him. This figure was Ling Yi. Lin Tian, you are too presumptuous, Ling Yi said coldly. He was the leader this time, but Lin Tian did not wait for him and went ahead first. This made him very angry. As the person in charge this time, I now revoke your right to visit the Valley of the Harp. Immediately go back to the Burning Sun sect. Who cares about you, idiot? Lin Tiantan said indifferently. Ignoring Ling Yi, who was blocking in front of him, he walked toward the Valley of the Harp. Go back, Ling Yi said. A good dog does not block the way. Go aside. Lin Tianji immediately sent a slap over. Lin Tian felt that he should be more domineering towards such a self-righteous and arrogant person. This slap was a little fierce, and it caused the air to buzz. This Ling Yi had made the 9 of them wait from morning to afternoon, and still did not appear. Now, he was asking him to go back and revoke his right to enter the Valley of the Harp. Did he really think that he was the sect leader of the Burning Sun sect? He did not have a good temper towards this Ling Yi. Ling Ye's eyes were cold as he raised his hand to meet the attack. The 2 palms collided, and it could be said that they were evenly matched. Either of them had lost. At this time, outside the Valley of the Harp, the 3 female disciples who were guarding the entrance noticed that something was amiss. Immediately, one of them rushed over. Who are you? You dare to fight outside of my Valley of the Harp? Quickly stop! Seeing the disciples of the Valley of the Harp appear, Ling Yi frowned and could not help but stop. I am Pa! A huge slap landed on Ling Ye's face, sending him flying. Lin Tian withdrew his right hand and looked at the 3 female disciples of the Valley of the Harp. He smiled and said, I am an inner disciple of the Burning Sun sect. This time, I have come to your esteemed sect under the orders of the sect master to exchange my experience in cultivation and battle with my senior and junior sisters. In the Dragon Spirit Valley, he had taken the initiative to stop once. At that time, Ling Yi continued to attack him. If he had not reacted quickly, he would have been injured. At this time, he was just imitating Ling Yi. You are a disciple of the Burning Sun sect? The 3 female disciples were shocked. They looked at Ling Yi, who had fallen to the side. Then he is? I don't know him. Lin Tian smiled. Lin Tian! An angry roar sounded. Ling Ye's face was distorted. He was a core disciple of the Burning Sun sect. This time, he led 9 inner disciples of the Burning Sun sect to the Valley of the Harp. Now, Lin Tian was lying through his teeth. In front of the 3 female disciples of the Valley of the Harp, he said that he did not know him. This was simply a slap to his face. With a clang, an ear-piercing sword sound rang out. Ling Yi pulled out his sword and directly slashed at Lin Tian. Lin Tiantan smiled. He spread out the yin-yang scepter and retreated. Stop! Where did you come from? Don't you dare mess around outside my Valley of the Harp! Seeing Ling Yi attack again, the female disciples were a little angry. Ling Yi reacted. After all, this was outside the Valley of the Harp. Moreover, the female disciples of the Valley of the Harp had already stood up. If he attacked again, it would be too disrespectful to the Valley of the Harp. Staring at Lin Tian, his face was gloomy. He fiercely gritted his teeth. Then, he put away his sword and took out a letter. I am Ling Yi of the Burning Sun sect. As he spoke, Ling Yi handed the letter to the leader of the 3 female disciples. The female disciple suspiciously took the letter. After glancing at it, her face suddenly changed slightly. A core disciple of the Burning Sun sect? Sorry. After reading the letter, the 3 female disciples of the Valley of the Harp's attitude towards Ling Yi suddenly improved. One of them stared at Lin Tian and said somewhat angrily, Didn't you say that you don't know him? Some people are too annoying. I don't want to know them, so I don't know them. Lin Tian smiled. The female disciple suddenly felt like she had been deceived. She snorted at Lin Tian. Lin Tian laughed and didn't care. At this moment, in the distance, 8 figures stepped on long swords and quickly approached. They are? The female disciple asked. Lin Tian smiled and said, I know them. They are all disciples of the Burning Sun sect who came to visit the Valley of the Harp this time. Hearing this, Ling Ye's expression suddenly became gloomy. This Lin Tian was clearly humiliating him. The 3 female disciples of the Valley of the Harp obviously also noticed this and couldn't help but look at each other. Senior brother Ling, is that so? The female disciple in the lead asked. Yes. Ling Yi said. When he said this word, Ling Yi stared at Lin Tian with killing intent intertwined. Lin Tian smiled indifferently, and tilted his head to look at the Valley of the Harp. Senior brother Ling Yi, my name is Lu Jie. I'm the person in charge of receiving you this time. The people of the Burning Sun sect should all be here, right? Please enter the valley. The leader of the 3 female disciples said. In addition, this time, people from the 7 Mysteries Pavilion also came to visit the valley. The leader is a core disciple of the 7 Mysteries Pavilion, senior brother Di Wahong. He is the disciple of the 7 Mysteries Pavilion's elder Yi Jingshang. He also just arrived, about 15 minutes ago. People from the 7 Mysteries Pavilion also came? Ling Yi said in surprise. Yes, senior brother Ling, please enter. Lu Jie said. Hearing Lu Jie's words, Lin Tian's eyes narrowed. People from the 7 Mysteries Pavilion also came? And it was Yi Jingshang's disciple. Thinking about what happened a few months ago in the Imperial City, he smiled coldly. At that time, that old bastard Yi Jingshang wanted to kill him. At that time, if it wasn't for an old drunkard appearing to protect him, he would have died long ago. Thinking about Yi Jingshang, he couldn't help but coldly snort in his heart. Following the crowd, Lin Tian crossed the outer gate of the Valley of the Harp and quickly entered the valley. As its name suggested, the Valley of the Harp was located in a huge valley. As soon as Lin Tian entered, he immediately felt a rich spirit chi fluctuation. This spirit chi fluctuation was much stronger than that of the Burning Sun sect, and the air was filled with a fragrance. It should be because they are all female disciples, Lin Tian thought. Following the female disciples, the group quickly arrived at the inner part of the Valley of the Harp. In front of them was a slightly spacious area. Similarly, 10 youths were standing together. The leader was extremely handsome and had a faint smile on his face. He was talking with several female disciples of the Valley of the Harp who were in charge of receiving them. Lu Jie led Lin Tian and the others and quickly arrived in front of the 10 youths. Senior brother Di Wahong, this is senior brother Ling Yi from the Burning Sun sect. He is the leader of the Burning Sun sect this time, Lu Jie said and then introduced Di Wahong to Ling Yi. Di Wahong tilted his head. After seeing Ling Yi, he smiled and walked over. Senior brother Ling Yi, nice to meet you. Di Wahong had a faint smile on his face, giving people a very bright and scholarly feeling. Hello, senior brother Di. This time, it is an honor to be able to exchange cultivation experiences with fellow Taoists of the Valley of the Harp and the Burning Sun sect. Di Wahong smiled. The other disciples of the Burning Sun sect and the 9 disciples of the 7 Mysteries Pavilion also greeted each other with smiles on their faces. Lin Tian stood in the crowd. He did not care about the people of the 7 Mysteries Pavilion. Instead, he looked around the Valley of the Harp. Jiyu was cultivating in the Valley of the Harp. For him, the only meaningful thing to do in the Valley of the Harp was to see Jiyu. Apart from that, he did not care about anything else. He had no interest in the so-called exchange of cultivation experiences. At this time, a few female voices sounded from not far away. They sounded very familiar to Lin Tian's ears. Senior Sister Su, will he really come? Of course he will. I have already seen the name list of the Burning Sun sect's disciples. Do you think I will lie to you? Junior sister is too eager to see him. Oh, let's go. Looking at the time, he should be here soon. Lin Tian looked towards the direction of the voices. About 10 feet away, behind a flower forest, 4 women walked out from a corner. One of them was Jiyu. At this time, there were 3 other women beside Jiyu. Lin Tian was very familiar with these 3 people. They were Su Qing, Shike, and Jiyu, whom he had met in the ancient tomb. Jiyu saw Lin Tian from afar and immediately revealed a happy expression. Junior sister? Lu Jie was a little surprised. Why did you come out? Lu Jie was the #1 expert in the Valley of the Harp's outer court. Naturally, she recognized Jiyu and was very clear about Jiyu's identity. As far as she knew, this new junior sister rarely appeared like this. She was basically cultivating with the Valley of the Harp's Valley Master. In this place, when the female disciples of the Valley of the Harp saw Jiyu, they all had smiles on their faces. Obviously, they all liked Ji. "Hello, Senior Sister Lu. I came out to look for an important friend." Ji chuckled. "Important friend?" Lu Jia was even more puzzled. Lin Tian looked at Ji from afar and smiled. Then, she walked towards Ji. At this time, many people from the Seven Profound Pavilion and the Burning Sun sect were staring at Ji. Their expressions changed. Although the female disciples of the Valley of the Harp were all extraordinarily beautiful, they were still lacking compared to Ji. Simply put, Ji was the kind of woman who would instantly attract people's attention in a crowd. Di Wenhong's eyes flashed. He smiled and greeted her. "Junior Sister Lu, this is..." As a core disciple of the Seven Profound Pavilion, Di Wenhong had seen many extraordinarily beautiful women. However, among the women he had seen, none could compare to Ji. This caused his heart to heat up. Lu Jia smiled and said, "This is the Valley Master's direct disciple, Junior Sister Ji." Di Wenhong's eyes flashed with surprise, but he quickly recovered. A gentle and elegant smile appeared on his face as he approached Ji. "Junior Sister Ji, hello? I am Di Wenhong, and I am..." Chapter 245. Reading on the phone, Lin Tian was very clear about what Di Wenhong was planning, so he was very unhappy. He moved in front of Ji and coldly stared at Di Wenhong. "What do you mean?" Di Wenhong frowned. On the other side, Ling Ye's face sank. "Lin Tian, you're too impudent. Come back!" Lin Tian didn't even look at Ling Yi. He only stared at Di Wenhong and said, "In short, don't go near her." Lu Jia was a little surprised. Although she knew that Ji was very outstanding, she didn't expect that the moment she appeared, she would cause such a dispute between the two great sections. This made Lu Jia feel helpless, especially that Lin Tian. He was really overbearing and strange. He made it seem like he had some kind of relationship with Ji. He actually told others not to go near her. Lu Jia really didn't like this kind of frivolous action. However, even if she didn't like it, Lu Jia was still the number one outer disciple of the Valley of the Harp. She didn't show it on her face. She smiled and said, "Two senior brothers, our junior sister still has some important matters to attend to. Could you please stop for a while and have a chat later?" Di Wenhong frowned, but immediately returned to normal. He smiled and said, "Since junior sister Ji has matters to attend to, I naturally wouldn't dare to disturb you." Di Wenhong indifferently glanced at Lin Tian and took a step back. Lu Jia smiled and nodded. She looked at Lin Tian again. "This senior brother, can I ask you to..." Lu Jia didn't finish her sentence, but her meaning was very clear. She wanted Lin Tian to leave Ji. "That, senior sister Lu." Ji looked at Lin Tian and then at Lu Jia. Lu Jia comforted her with a smile. "Junior sister, don't worry. This senior brother only wants to know you because you're too outstanding. He won't block your path, right?" Lu Jia's face was still smiling. She looked at Lin Tian again. Her meaning couldn't be more obvious. She wanted Lin Tian to immediately leave Ji's side. Di Wenhong said indifferently, "Your Excellency, why haven't you left yet? Don't be so tactless. Lin Tian, come back!" Ling Yi berated. At this time, seeing that Lin Tian did not move, some of the other female disciples in the Valley of the Harp also showed displeasure. Ji and Su Qing stood behind Ji, covering their mouths as they snickered. They looked like they were having a hard time holding back their laughter. Senior sister." Ji tugged at the corner of Lin Tian's clothes. He looked at Lu Jia in embarrassment and whispered, "The person I'm looking for is him." Instantly, except for Ji, Lin Tian, and the others, everyone was stunned. "What?" Lu Jia gaped and pointed at Lin Tian now. "You're looking for him?" Ji was a little embarrassed and nodded. Lu Jia. Staring at Lin Tian, Lu Jia suddenly blushed. She was still thinking that Lin Tian's actions were a little frivolous, as if he knew Ji. She did not expect that they really knew each other. Ji actually came out from the Valley Master's place to look for Lin Tian. This was simply... She felt her face heat up. The other female disciples around them also widened their eyes and stared at Lin Tian in disbelief. The most outstanding woman in their sect, the direct disciple of the Valley Master, specially came out from her cultivation just to look for this man in front of them. Pfft! Ji Yu and the others finally laughed out loud, tears almost flowing out of their eyes. Lu Jie swept a glance at Ji Yu and the others and was instantly annoyed. She said angrily, "You three brats, see how I'll deal with you later." Lu Jie was not stupid. Looking at Ji Yu and the others' reactions, she immediately knew that they knew everything. However, they did not say anything and just watched her embarrass herself. "Don't, senior sister. We didn't have a chance to speak." That's right, that's right." The three women quickly begged for mercy. At this time, Di Wenhong's complexion was extremely ugly. Thinking back to how he had ridiculed Lin Tian and said, "As a person, don't be too tactless," his complexion became even uglier, as if he had eaten a fly. Immediately, he stared at Lin Tian with an extremely cold expression, his fists involuntarily clenched. Lin Tian, The 8 inner disciples of the Burning Sun sect were astonished. They did not expect that Lin Tian actually knew the direct disciple of the Valley of the Harp's Valley Master. Moreover, their relationship seemed to be very close. These 8 people were very surprised, but Ling Ye's expression was not very good. This Lin Tian actually had a relationship with the direct disciple of the Valley of the Harp's Valley Master. For a moment, this place was very quiet. "Senior sister, I'll bring him around the valley, is that okay?" Ji Yu said to Lu Jie. Lu Jie smiled. "Of course, go ahead." As the direct disciple of the Valley of the Harp's Valley Master, Ji Yu's status was much higher than an ordinary disciple like her. It was even higher than a core disciple. But even so, Ji Yu was usually very respectful to them. This naturally made Lu Jie and the others like and accommodate Ji Yu. Ji Yu nodded, smiled at Lin Tian, and walked away. Lin Tian naturally did not care about the others and calmly followed. Di Wenhong clenched his fists even tighter, his eyes faintly intertwined with killing intent. The other female disciples of the Valley of the Harp looked at each other in dismay. Lu Jie coughed twice, still wearing a smile on her face. She looked at Ling Yi, Di Wenhong, and the others and said, "I'm really sorry about this small episode. Senior brothers of the Burning Sun sect and the 7 Profound Pavilion, we have already prepared a place for you to stay. Please take a rest. Lu Jie will bring you around for a walk. The cultivation meeting will begin tomorrow." The environment of the Valley of the Harp could be said to be excellent. Birds chirped and flowers bloomed everywhere, giving people a very comfortable feeling. Lin Tian and Ji Yu walked side by side on a small path in the valley, causing many female disciples along the way to be surprised. "Right, thank you for asking Senior Sister Su Qing to bring me something. When they came back, they said they saw you and couldn't help but praise you for being very strong. Now that I've seen you, you're even stronger than they said. You were actually able to block that Di Wenhong." Ji Yu chuckled, blinked, and said, "What's your cultivation level now?" "Knowledge C 3rd layer." Lin Tian said with a smile. "So fast. In the past, I was much stronger than you. I was several small stages higher than you. Now you've surpassed me," Ji Yu said in surprise. "Being stronger than you is natural. Otherwise, how could I protect you?" Lin Tian Andao said. Ji Yu made a sound of surprise. He looked at Lin Tian from head to toe, covered his mouth, and laughed. "You're getting better and better at making girls happy." Lin Tian suddenly felt a little embarrassed. "I'm just telling the truth." Ji Yu chuckled and continued to lead Lin Tian forward. The environment of this place was much better. It was much more elegant and quiet, and the fragrance in the air was much stronger. Lin Tian glanced around and saw that there were all kinds of flowers and plants. They were all species that could not be seen in the mortal world. "Right, are you used to this place?" Lin Tian asked Ji Yu. "It's pretty good. It's just that there are some fights. I don't like it too much," Ji Yu said. Lin Tian was stunned. Thinking about it, Ji Yu really did not like to fight with others. It was also because of this that when he was in the Imperial City, the elders of the Northern Flame Imperial Courtyard invited Jiyu to cultivate in the Northern Flame Imperial Courtyard several times, but they were all rejected. It's normal for sects to have fights. Lin Tian comforted. That's true. Jiyu smiled. Right, it seems that you have reached the peak of the first layer of the knowledge sea. Lin Tian Andao said. With a wave of his right hand, a small stone ring appeared in his hand. There are 24th level divine refining runes in here. It can increase the cultivation speed of the knowledge sea by about 3 times. You can use it now. Jiyu was surprised. You can already inscribe 4th level runes? Lin Tian smiled. I reached the 4th level when I was in the Imperial City. It's just that I didn't inscribe 4th level runes. Jiyu said. Oh. And then happily received it. No matter what, this was a gift from Lin Tian, and it was a very valuable thing. She received it and put it away. As the direct disciple of the Valley of the Harp Valley Master, she naturally had something like a stone ring. Moreover, there were more than 200 cubic meters inside. They had not seen each other for a long time. The two walked side by side and had a lot to talk about. The atmosphere was very good, and there was laughter from time to time. At this time, a few women walked over from a corner not far away. The person in the lead had phoenix eyes and was about 20 years old. Her beauty was also very outstanding. Soon, the group of people approached. Senior Sister Xinyan, Jiyu said. Xinyan stopped and glanced at Jiyu. Her gaze landed on Lin Tian, and a faint smile appeared on her face. Junior Sister Ji, as the direct disciple of the Valley Master, I hope you can pay attention to your image. Xinyan was a core disciple of the Zither Valley. Her cultivation was at the 5th level of the Sea of Consciousness realm, and she was the disciple of an elder. Senior Sister, I don't understand what you mean, Jiyu said. Don't you know what I mean? You casually brought a man to Shinrei Garden. If other junior sisters saw this, what would they think? Xinyan said. Although you are the Valley Master's disciple, don't be too ostentatious. Isn't it better to find a room to do some things? If you can have fun, others won't find you an eyesore. Jiyu frowned. Senior Sister, your words are a bit too much. Sorry, Junior Sister. Your Senior Sister will speak frankly if she has something to say. After all, I am also a core disciple of the Valley of the Harp. I have an obligation to protect the image of the Valley of the Harp. Therefore, I don't want you to do anything out of line and bring shame to the Valley of the Harp. Xinyan smiled faintly. Lin Tian's face suddenly sank. He suddenly remembered what Su Qing and the other 2 women had said to him in the ancient tomb. Although the disciples of several elders of the Valley of the Harp were strong, they had only mastered 3 levels of the White Lotus Sword mantra. However, Jiyu had comprehended 4 levels with his Divine Vein realm cultivation. Now it seemed that Xinyan, as the disciple of one of the elders of the Valley of the Harp, was obviously jealous of Jiyu's talent, so she deliberately made things difficult for him and insulted him. After a pause, Lin Tian recalled what Jiyu had said to him just now. There were many fights here, and she didn't like it. Thinking about it, this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. It should have happened several times. Lin Tian, let's go this way. Jiyu tugged on Lin Tian's clothes and walked to the other side. Obviously, he didn't want to fight with Xinyan. Xinyan snorted with a smug look in her eyes. However, in the next moment, Xinyan frowned. The others were also moved. Chapter 246. Lin Tian was very unhappy. Xinyan's words were too unpleasant to listen to. It had already risen to the level of an insult. Although Jiyu didn't like to compete with others, he couldn't just stand by and watch. He couldn't tolerate someone insulting Jiyu like this. Full text read. Apologize to her. He walked in front of Xinyan and said coldly. Jiyu pulled Lin Tian and said, Lin Tian, it's fine. Let's go this way. There are some people that you can't give in to. The more you give in to her, the more she will think that you are easy to bully. Lin Tian shook his head and looked at Xinyan again. Apologize. Xinyan's face sank. Who do you think you are? In my Valley of the Harp, do you think you are worthy of me apologizing? Lin Tian's expression was cold. He took another step forward. Don't challenge my patience. Apologize. As he stared at Xinyan, a chill spread out from his body. Xinyan was so shocked that her expression changed slightly. This chill was indeed somewhat terrifying. Behind Xinyan, a few ordinary disciples felt their hearts tremble and couldn't help but tremble. You came to my Valley of the Harp, yet you want to turn the tables? Xinyan coldly said. As she spoke, Xinyan directly attacked. Her palm reached out to grab Lin Tian. Lin Tian raised his hand and punched Xinyan's palm, causing Xinyan to retreat several steps. Senior Sister Xin, are you a disciple of the Seven Profound Pavilion or the Burning Sun sect? This is too much. What kind of place do you think our Valley of the Harp is? Several disciples angrily said. Almost all the disciples in the Valley of the Harp knew that the disciples of the Seven Profound Pavilion and the Burning Sun sect had come to visit the Valley of the Harp. At this time, a man had appeared in Xinrui Garden. Several female disciples could vaguely guess Lin Tian's origin. Lin Tian was expressionless as she stared at Xinyan. Apologize! Xinyan's expression was slightly ugly. She glanced at Lin Tian and then looked at Jiyu. She sneered. You usually put on an act and seem to be very noble and pure. Who would have thought that you would seduce men from other sects? In such a short time, you were able to make this man fall head over heels for you. You're really good at seducing people. Senior sister, you're older than me and entered the sect earlier than me, so I respect you. However, don't go overboard. Jiyu was a little angry. What's the rush? So what if I'm right? You don't have to be so angry and embarrassed at you. Xinyan coldly laughed. However, before she could finish speaking, a flash appeared in front of her. Lin Tian was right in front of her like lightning. You, Pa! With a resounding slap, Xinyan was sent flying in the next moment. Jiyu was slightly stunned. He didn't expect Lin Tian to slap Xinyan's face. How dare you hit my face? Xinyan steadied her body and suddenly screamed. How dare you? Lin Tianling said. His figure was as fast as a startled swan. For the first time, he used the second level of the yin and yang loaf to its limit. He instantly appeared in front of Xinyan and slapped her again. With a bang, this slap landed firmly on Xinyan's face and sent her flying again. The more Xinyan spoke, the more she went overboard. It really made him very angry. Beside them, several female disciples were shocked by Lin Tian's ferocious power. Xinyan was a core disciple of the Valley of the Harp. Her cultivation base was at the fifth sky of the Sea of Consciousness. She was very powerful, but now, she was at a disadvantage in front of Lin Tian 3 times in a row. The first time she was repelled, and the second and third time she was slapped. This really made their hearts palpitate. I'll kill you! Xinyan screamed. Violent sword chi suddenly rushed up and cut a large piece of the surrounding flowers and plants into pieces. Lin Tian's face was cold and indifferent as he took a step forward. Lin Tian, be careful. Jiyu said. Jiyu was very clear about Lin Tian's temper. It was impossible for Lin Tian to stop at this time. She also knew that Xinyan's strength was very strong. After all, her cultivation base was at the fifth sky of the Sea of Consciousness. Moreover, she cultivated the Valley of the Harp's strongest secret technique, the White Lotus Sword technique. If she really entered the battle, it was hard to say who would win. At this time, Xinyan had already rushed toward Lin Tian. After being slapped twice in a row by Lin Tian, Xinyan's eyes had turned red. She brandished her treasured sword, creating a gust of wind. The sword chi within her was as strong as a rainbow, causing Lin Tian to be slightly surprised. Although he was very displeased with Xinyan's words and actions, he had to admit that Xinyan, who was at the fifth sky of the Sea of Consciousness, was indeed very strong. He shook the heart-spirit sword and directly slashed out. On both sides, several female disciples of the Valley of the Harp were extremely shocked. A foreign man dared to make a move in the Valley of the Harp. He was too bold. Moreover, As the battle between Lin Tian and Xinyan began, several women were gradually shocked by Lin Tian's strength. He was actually slightly suppressing Xinyan and was in the upper hand. Lin Tian held the Heart Spirit Sword and displayed the Azure Thunder Sword technique to the extreme. Every sword slash carried a thunderous sword light. Clang! 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 The swords collided constantly. Lin Tian's sword was very fast, very accurate, and very ruthless. He gradually forced Xinyan to retreat. In this core blossom garden, it was unknown how many precious plants and flowers were minced by the two's sword chi. At this moment, a cold snort sounded, like a heavy drum being beaten. Far away, an old woman appeared. She was like a ghost flying in the air. In a flash, she came to the sky above the battlefield. "Elder Su!" someone exclaimed. Xinyan stopped and shouted, "Master!" Lin Tian's face froze. He obviously felt the pressure. This old woman's momentum was really terrifying. "Foreign man, how dare you be so presumptuous in the Valley of the Harp?" the old woman shouted coldly. As she spoke, she actually slapped her palm toward Lin Tian. Lin Tian only felt the tangible palm force pressing toward him, sealing off all of his paths of retreat. "Elder Su, stop!" Ji Yu's expression changed greatly. Clang! The sound of a sword rang from afar. A light sword flew over and directly shattered the old woman's light palm strike. Silently, a beautiful woman appeared above Lin Tian's head. Her aura was even stronger than the old woman's. "Masters have no right to interfere in a fight between disciples. Elder Su, it's better for you to step aside." Seeing the person, several female disciples were shocked. They hurriedly bowed toward the sky. "Valley Master!" Ji Yu was pleasantly surprised and immediately felt relieved. Lin Tian raised his head. He was a little surprised. He didn't expect the beautiful woman to come. "Yu Wushuang, you better look carefully. Is this man a disciple of the Valley of the Harp?" The old woman looked at the beautiful woman and coldly said, "When did the Valley of the Harp have a male disciple? His master is Li Changfeng," Yu Wushuang said lightly. "Li Changfeng? He's Li Changfeng's disciple?" The old woman's expression changed. "Impossible! I've never heard of Li Changfeng accepting a disciple. Yes or no, you can ask the Burning Sun sect master." Yu Wushuang stared indifferently at the old woman. "The Valley of the Harp has received great kindness from Li Changfeng. The previous Valley of the Harp master, who is now the Grand Elder, said that if Li Changfeng has a descendant or disciple, they can freely enter the Valley of the Harp and be regarded as a legitimate disciple of the Valley of the Harp. Even if he wants to learn the White Lotus Sword Code, the Valley of the Harp will pass it down without reservation. Do you want to see the Grand Elder?" The old woman's face suddenly became very gloomy. At the same time, she was very shocked. That Li Changfeng actually accepted a disciple? Hearing Yu Wushuang's words, Lin Tian himself was also a little surprised. What did an old drunkard do to the Valley of the Harp that made the previous Valley of the Harp master make such a promise? You can even learn the White Lotus Sword mantra if you want to. One must know that the White Lotus Sword Code is a secret of the Valley of the Harp. Only the Valley Master candidates are qualified to learn it. Not only Lin Tian, but Ji Yu was also shocked. That sloppy and old drunkard is actually so powerful? Clang! At this moment, the sound of a sword whistling was extremely ear-piercing. Although Lin Tian had some doubts about what an old drunkard did to help the Valley of the Harp, at this moment, he was too lazy to think so much. He raised the inner spirit sword and pointed it directly at Xinyan. A sword light flew past Xinyan's cheek and cut a bluestone behind Xinyan into pieces. "Apologize! Don't even think about it," Xinyan said angrily. "Is that so?" Lin Tian's face was cold. "I'll beat you until you apologize." As soon as he finished speaking, he shook his long sword and the sound of the thunder sword vibrated, heading straight for Xinyan. "How dare you!" The old woman was instantly enraged. Lin Tian actually dared to make a move in front of her. She raised her hand and was about to slap Lin Tian. With a clang, a sword aura flew past and stopped the old woman. Elder Su, have you forgotten what I said? When disciples fight, there is no right for the master to step in, Yu Wushwang said. The old woman's face was cold. Yu Wushwang, you are using external forces to bully Xinyan. He is Li Chongfeng's disciple, which means he is a disciple of the Valley of the Harp. If you really want to calculate, he is not considered an external force. What's wrong with hitting your disciple? Yu Wushwang's face was slightly colder. Your disciple has bullied Jiyu many times. Do you think I don't know? When Xinyan was bullying Jiyu, I, as the master, did not step in. So now, you better stay aside obediently. Otherwise, don't blame me for not giving you face. You. The old woman's face suddenly turned green. Yu Wushwang was actually using her identity as the Valley Master to suppress her. Clang! The sword whistled continuously. Lin Tian's sword gradually emitted the power of fire, and the Thunder Flame Sword radiance was fully displayed. After the Thunder Flame Sword radiance was displayed, Lin Tian's aura suddenly increased by several times. His entire person was like an unsheathed heavenly sword, forcing Xinyan, who was at the 5th celestial level of consciousness, to retreat again and again. Behind him, Jiyu stared at Lin Tian, looking a little nervous. Even if I didn't see the beginning, I can tell that you are being bullied by Xinyan again. Yu Wushwang stood in the air, her lips moving slightly. She condensed her qi into a line and directly transmitted it into Jiyu's ears. Jiyu, sometimes it is a good thing that you don't like to fight. However, you are also a cultivator. When it is time to unsheath your sword, you should unsheath it. Jiyu looked up at the sky and then looked forward. Looking at Lin Tian, her eyes became a little flickering. The sword whistled continuously. Lin Tian displayed the Thunder Flame Sword radiance. His sword momentum was like a rainbow, like a sword storm. Damn it! Xinyan screamed. With a boom, a terrifying sword momentum rushed out of Xinyan's body. The third sword of the White Lotus Sword Codex! A female disciple exclaimed. Lin Tian frowned. He naturally felt the terror of this sword. However, he did not care about this level. Suddenly, a hand grabbed the corner of his clothes, and Jiyu flashed in front of him. I will do it myself, Jiyu said. As soon as she finished speaking, an even stronger sword will rushed out. Dense flower petals rushed out of Jiyu's body, instantly condensing into a lotus flower sword aura in front of her. Bright light spread out in all directions, and the tyrannical sword momentum instantly suppressed Xinyan's aura. This is... The old woman's expression changed. Impossible! The 5th level of the White Lotus Sword Codex, the Heart Lotus Sword! Even Yu Wushwang was shocked. She muttered to herself. This child, at this age, with this level of cultivation, has comprehended the White Lotus Sword Codex to this extent. This level of comprehension. End of chapter. Chapter 247. The dazzling lotus sword aura hovered in front of Jiyu. A majestic sword aura surged out from the center, instantly shattering Xinyan's third attack. A few strands of hair fell down Xinyan's face. Full text to read, staring at Jiyu in front of him, Lin Tian was also shocked. Although Jiyu's cultivation was not as strong as Xinyan's, the sword aura that Jiyu exuded was not something that Xinyan could compare to. The difference between the two was too great. This terrifying sword aura actually erased the difference in cultivation between the two. Xinyan was stunned at first, then she roared. Jiyu! You cut off my hair! With a boom, Xinyan's true energy went berserk. Her eyes were blood-red as she glared at Jiyu and Lin Tian. Stop! The old woman came to Xinyan's side and suppressed her aura. But master, I told you to stop! The old woman's face darkened. Xinyan was furious, and there was hatred in her eyes. However, when she saw the old woman's stern expression, she could only stop. The old woman glanced at Jiyu, then looked at Yu Wushwang in the air. Valley Master, you have indeed accepted a good disciple. Congratulations. The old woman's voice was neither yin nor yang. Although she was congratulating him, her words were mixed with a gloomy taste, making people feel uncomfortable no matter how they heard it. I know how outstanding my disciple is. There's no need for you to tell me, Yu Wushhuang said indifferently. The old woman snorted, pulled Xingyan, and turned to leave. Clang! The sound of a sword rang out. The sword ray landed in front of the old woman and shattered a piece of limestone. Lin Tian stepped forward and pointed his sword at Xingyan. Apologize before you leave! The old woman tilted her head, and her gaze was sinister. Young man, so what if you're Li Changfeng's disciple? Don't be too arrogant. This isn't your Burning Sun sect, but the Valley of the Harp. You better behave yourself in someone else's sect. Ji Yu tugged at Lin Tian and whispered. Lin Tian, forget it. After all, I did cut off a strand of her hair. Some things can't be counted. Lin Tian shook his head and pointed the tip of his sword at Xingyan. If you want to leave here, apologize first. You! Xingyan glared at Lin Tian, her eyes filled with killing intent. The old woman's face turned cold. Do you really think that your master's name will allow you to do whatever you want in the Valley of the Harp? Why I'm standing here has nothing to do with my master. As for acting recklessly, don't put a hat on me. When it comes to acting recklessly, isn't that useless disciple of yours the one who's acting recklessly? In terms of status, Ji Yu seems to be slightly higher than her. Does she have the right to speak ill of her time and time again? Lin Tianling said coldly. The old woman's face was gloomy. That's my Valley of the Harp's business. You have no right to interfere. Lin Tianling smiled and looked at Yu Wushhuang in the sky. Will you help me block that old woman? Of course. Yu Wushhuang said lightly. As the Valley Master, it was not convenient for her to directly teach Xingyan a lesson. Otherwise, she would be accused of favoring her disciple and using her status as the Valley Master to oppress others. This always made her feel uncomfortable. Now that Lin Tian had come, it was clear that he wanted to stand up for Ji Yu and force Xingyan to apologize. She was very happy to see this scene. After getting Yu Wushhuang's affirmative answer, Lin Tian's long sword shook and directly pressed down on Xingyan. Presumptuous! The old woman was furious. With a clang, a wisp of sword chi flew out and directly forced the old woman to retreat. Elder Su, please watch quietly, Yu Wushhuang said indifferently. The old woman's face was extremely gloomy. With Yu Wushhuang blocking her, there was no way she could break through. Clang! The sword clanged, and Lin Tian's expression was indifferent. He used the yin and yang hua to the limit. His whole body seemed to have turned into a phantom, slashing at Xingyan from all directions in an instant. I'll kill you! Xingyan was furious and used the White Lotus Sword manual again. The sword will of the third level was shockingly strong. Lin Tianling snorted and pushed the Thunderfire sword to the limit. An extremely violent aura rushed out of his body, and the power of thunder and fire covered his entire body. Although the White Lotus Sword manual was a terrifying airborne realm martial art, Xingyan had only comprehended the third level after all. It was not as strong as the complete Thunderfire sword. Cut! Lin Tian held the sword with both hands and used all his combat power, slashing down fiercely. The sword light of the two collided and shattered a lot of flowers and plants around. After a while, with a bang, a figure was sent flying. It was Xingyan. Lin Tian shook a little, but he quickly stabilized. Staring at Xingyan, his expression was indifferent. He used the yin and yang hua and instantly crossed a distance of 30 meters, directly coming in front of Xingyan. You, don't move, Lin Tianling said. At this time, his sword was placed horizontally next to Xingyan's cheek, and the light of the fire burned brightly. Seeing this scene, everyone's expression changed. They did not expect Lin Tian to end the battle so quickly, which really shocked these people. After all, Xingyan was at the 5th level of the Sea of Consciousness. Lin Tian was the only one who knew what was going on. That was because he used all his strength to slash with the sword just now, which was why he was able to defeat Xingyan in an instant. Now apologize. Lin Tianling stared at Xingyan coldly. Don't even think about it. Xingyan was furious and slashed at Lin Tian with the sword. Lin Tian raised his leg and kicked the treasure sword in Xinyan's hand away at such a short distance. After it fell to the ground, it made a crisp metallic sound. He held the inner spirit sword, and the flames on the sword became even hotter. He said coldly, "You'd better apologize immediately, otherwise my sword may leave a few marks on your face." At this time, the inner spirit sword had been burned red by the flames, like a hot soldering iron. Xinyan trembled. At this time, if Lin Tian's sword really touched her face, she would be disfigured. "Apologize, and I'll give you 3 breaths of time," Lin Tianling said. "You!" Xinyan was shocked and angry. On the other side, the old woman's face was also gloomy, and her eyes were filled with killing intent. "Evil creature, stop! You too!" Yu Wuxuang crossed and stood in front of the old woman. "Yu Wuxuang!" the old woman shouted. Yu Wuxuang's face darkened. "Su Yu, get this straight. I'm the Valley Master." The old woman's name was Su Yu. When she heard Yu Wuxuang's words, her face became even gloomier. Lin Tian opened his mouth again at this time without any scruples. 3. Hearing the word 3, Su Yu clenched her fists. Xinyan looked sideways at the sword beside her cheek and trembled. 2. Xinyan's body trembled even more, and her face became pale. Jiyu couldn't bear it and said, "Lin Tian, forget it, it's enough." 1. Lin Tian was expressionless. At this moment, his face became a little cold. The inner spirit sword shook again, and the flames burned fiercely. Xinyan screamed, trembling and crying, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry!" There was no woman who didn't care about her face, especially Xinyan, who was quite beautiful. If her face was ruined, it would really make her life worse than death. At this last moment, she couldn't resist the fear. After spitting out these words, Xinyan spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted. With a swoosh, Su Yu flashed over and supported Xinyan. Staring at Lin Tian, Su Yu's old face was full of coldness, and the killing intent in her eyes was not concealed at all. "Li Chongfeng's disciple, you're not bad. This old woman will remember you. I'm not happy at all to be remembered by an old monster." Lin Tian now. This old woman had the intention to kill him, so he naturally wouldn't be nice to her. Su Yu stared coldly at Lin Tianyi and left with Xinyan. Not far away, the few female disciples who were originally with Xinyan were shocked. They were really shocked by Lin Tian. He was too strong. Too domineering. "You guys go back first," Yu Wuxuang said. The few female disciples hurriedly bowed and quickly left. In an instant, only Yu Wuxuang, Jiyu, and Lin Tian were left. "Not bad." Yu Wuxuang stared at Lin Tian, her eyes full of admiration. Lin Tian now said, "It's all thanks to Senior's help. However, it's not good to ruin a girl's face," Yu Wuxuang said. "That depends on the other party's face," Lin Tian now said. "Moreover, I was just threatening her. I'm not so cruel as to really ruin her face." Yu Wuxuang nodded and came to Jiyu's side. "Little Yu, when did you comprehend the 5th layer?" Yu Wuxuang liked this disciple of hers very much. She was only 16 years old, and her sea of consciousness was at the 1st layer. At this stage, she had comprehended the 5th layer of the White Lotus Sword technique. It was really giving her face. It should be known that the few core disciples were all at the 5th layer of the sea of consciousness. They were around 20 years old, but they had only comprehended the 3rd layer. 2 days ago, Jiyu said. Yu Wuxuang smiled even more happily. Even with her personality, she couldn't help but praise Jiyu. "Okay, I won't disturb you," Yu Wuxuang said, nodded to Lin Tian, and left. In Shinrui Garden, only Lin Tian and Jiyu were left. "Just now, thank you. I'm quite happy." Jiyu smiled. Lin Tian smiled and knocked Jiyu's forehead, saying, "What are you thanking me for? You came to Beast Demon Ridge alone to protect me. Now that I'm stronger than you, of course I have to protect you. If someone wants to bully you in front of me, I won't allow it. You really know how to coax people." Jiyu snickered and said, However, she only took advantage of me verbally. It's nothing. Lin Tian shook her head. You can't let others take advantage of you verbally. What's more, it's already beyond a certain extent. Xin Yan's words were already considered a humiliation. The two chatted in Xinrui Garden for a long time. When the sky was dark, Jiyu sent Lin Tian to a residential area. It was the temporary residence arranged by the Valley of the Harp for the Burning Sun sect disciples. Jiyu had been in the Valley of the Harp for a long time, so he was naturally very familiar with the Valley of the Harp. After bringing Lin Tian over, he waved goodbye and walked towards his residence. Lin Tian watched as Jiyu left, and then entered the room arranged by the Valley of the Harp. The room in the Valley of the Harp was a little plain, but it was much better than his residence in the Burning Sun sect. At least the room was spacious, and the furnishings were not bad. It was not like the rooms in the Burning Sun sect, where there were only simple beds, tables, and chairs. After all, it's a female sect, Lin Tian thought to himself. Closing the door, Lin Tian sat on the bed, and silently operated the 4 extreme meridians to cultivate. Very quickly, the night passed. On this day, Lu Jia came early and invited the disciples of the 7 Profound Pavilion and the Burning Sun sect to the martial arts practice field in the Valley of the Harp. The disciples of the 3 great sects would exchange their experiences in cultivation and battle. It was set for this day. Chapter 248. Reading on a mobile phone. The training field in the Valley of the Harp wasn't small. It was about the same size as the Burning Sun sect, but the environment was better. There were many old vines growing at the edge of the training field, and there was a faint fragrance in the air. Everyone, please search for the most complete information. When Lin Tian arrived at the training field with Lu Jia and the others, the members of the Valley of the Harp were already waiting there. He immediately saw a familiar face. It was Xin Yan. Xin Yan naturally saw Lin Tian as well. She clenched her fists, and her eyes were filled with hatred. Lin Tian glanced at Xin Yan from the corner of his eyes, but he didn't care. Lin Tian saw a few familiar figures beside Xin Yan. They were the female disciples of the Valley of the Harp that he saw in Xinrui Garden yesterday. This made him slightly surprised. He didn't know that the Valley of the Harp had designated Xin Yan as the representative for this cultivation exchange. Yesterday, Xin Yan had brought a few disciples of the Valley of the Harp to greet the people of the 7 Mysteries Pavilion and the Burning Sun sect. However, they didn't expect something to happen. Everyone, this way please, Lu Jia said and immediately retreated. The 7 Mysteries Pavilion was led by Di Wahong, the Burning Sun sect was led by Ling Yi, and the Valley of the Harp was led by Xin Yan. A group of people surrounded the main stage in the center of the training field in the Valley of the Harp. There were some benches placed beside the main stage for people to rest. After the cultivation exchange began, the disciples of the 3 sects began to exchange their daily cultivation experiences. At this time, not far from the training field, there were many disciples of the Valley of the Harp. They were all staring at the center of the field, and many of them were even listening attentively. After all, those who were able to participate in this cultivation exchange were all very outstanding. Listening to these people discuss their cultivation experiences was also very rewarding. At this time, some of the elders of the Valley of the Harp also came and stood in the distance. Not far away, Ji Yu and Yu Wushuang stood together, blinking their beautiful eyes as they stared at the center of the martial arts practice field. Of course, their eyes were always on Lin Tian. It seems that he is very uninterested, Yu Wushuang said. At this moment, Lin Tian was sitting quietly in the middle of the martial arts practice field. He was resting with his eyes closed. Ji Yu chuckled. It seems like he won't be interested in this kind of thing. After all, he is already very strong. You're really confident in him. It's not good to praise him so openly, is it? You haven't married him yet. If I pass the Valley of the Harp to you in the future, I might have to worry about you occasionally selling our sect for him. Yu Wushuang teased. Ji Yu's face turned slightly red as he said angrily. Master! Yu Wushuang smiled. I'm just kidding. On the martial arts practice field, the 7 Profound Pavilion, the Valley of the Harp, and the Burning Sun sect's outstanding disciples were having an intense discussion. From the body refinement realm to the knowledge sea, every major realm was discussed in great detail. Not only did they gain a lot from each other, but the outer disciples of the Valley of the Harp on the periphery were also greatly inspired. Lin Tian had his eyes closed, completely uninterested in the discussion between the three parties. The reason he came to the Valley of the Harp was entirely for Jiyu, and sitting here was also to show respect to the Valley of the Harp. After all, Lu Jia was waiting outside early in the morning to greet them. He couldn't say that he wasn't interested and didn't want to go, right? That would be too rude. Time passed by minute, and soon, an hour had passed. At this moment, a voice sounded out. Yesterday, the Burning Sun sect's brother Lin Tian's speed seemed to be quite fast. This one is not talented, but I would like to experience it. On the martial arts practice field, Di Wuhong had unknowingly stood there with a warm smile on his face. Brother Lin Tian, would you like to come up on stage and give me some pointers? Di Wuhong had wanted to get close to Jiyu yesterday, but had been stopped by Lin Tian. This made Di Wuhong very unhappy, and when he found out that the person Jiyu was looking for was Lin Tian, Di Wuhong became even more unhappy. Now, he was standing on the main stage and asking for pointers from Lin Tian. Naturally, he wanted to make Lin Tian look bad in front of everyone. Lin Tian opened his eyes and indifferently glanced at Di Wuhong. Not interested. Although this Di Wuhong had a smile on his face, he could clearly see the trace of hostility in the depths of his eyes. Of course, this wasn't because he was afraid of Di Wuhong, but because he didn't want to give the other party any face. Who did he think he was? Hearing these words, many people in the surroundings were moved. Why did he refuse? Isn't it good to exchange pointers? Stupid! That Di Wuhong is a core disciple of the Seven Mysteries Pavilion. How could an ordinary person be his opponent? You mean that Lin Tian is afraid of fighting? Isn't this obvious? Outside the martial arts practice field, many people muttered. Xinyan coldly stared at Lin Tian and mockingly said, "A coward who doesn't dare to fight! Lin Tian, this friend of the Seven Mysteries Pavilion, is shameless enough to ask for pointers from you. Why aren't you going up?" Ling Yi said in a deep voice. Lin Tian glanced at Ling Yi. Shameless enough to ask for pointers? Your words are really good. I thought you were from the Seven Mysteries Pavilion. He didn't have a good impression of this Ling Yi and didn't want to say anything to him. Ling Ye's face darkened. As the person in charge of the Burning Sun sect this time, I order you to go up. Lin Tian was disdainful and couldn't be bothered with Ling Yi. This little guy has quite the character. He's really similar to his master back then. In the distance, Yu Wushuang faintly smiled. On the main stage, Di Wenhong's face slightly darkened, but soon, Di Wenhong narrowed his eyes. It seems that Brother Lin Tian is too embarrassed to make the first move. I'm not talented, but I really want to exchange pointers with Brother Lin. I'll return to being a lowly person. Finishing his words, Di Wenhong's figure flashed and directly rushed towards Lin Tian. True essence intertwined as Di Wenhong's palm shot towards Lin Tian. Seeing this scene, many people's faces changed. The Burning Sun sect disciples who were originally in the same position as Lin Tianyi instantly scattered in all directions, fearing that they would be implicated. One had to know that Di Wuhong was a Sea of Consciousness fifth celestial layer expert. He was much stronger than them. If they were implicated, they might suffer heavy injuries. Lin Tian's face turned cold. He stood up and kicked the bench in front of him. With a bang, the bench was smashed into pieces by Di Wenhong's palm. Brother Lin's reaction is pretty good, Di Wenhong said. Saying this, he increased his speed and once again rushed towards Lin Tian. You're looking for trouble, Lin Tianling said. Brother Lin, you're thinking too much. I'm just itching to fight. I want to exchange some battle experience with Brother Lin Tian. Di Wenhong narrowed his eyes. In the distance, Jiyu frowned, showing some displeasure. Di Wenhong forcing Lin Tian to fight made her unhappy. Girl, just watch. He won't lose, Yu Wushuang said. I know. Girl, you're too blindly confident in him. You haven't even married him yet! Master, you're doing it again! I'm just joking. Keep watching, keep watching. In the martial arts stage, Di Wenhong sent palm after palm towards Lin Tian. Every palm caused the air to tremble. It was as if he was waving a hand blade. The power was quite oppressive, causing many onlookers to feel apprehensive. At this time, the two people weren't fighting on the main stage, but on the martial arts stage. It was a bit chaotic. Brother Lin, please don't be lenient, Di Wenhong said. Saying this, Di Wenhong's attacks became heavier. His palms shot out like a gust of wind. Lin Tian's face was cold. He clenched his right hand into a fist and sent out a shattering meteor fist. The tyrannical power forced Di Wenhong to retreat several steps. Since you're looking for trouble, I'll help you. Saying this, the heart-soul sword appeared in his hand. He shook the long sword and the azure thunder sword whistled as it slashed towards Di Wenhong. Clang! The sound of thunder resounded in all directions. A long sword light swept across, causing everyone to tremble. Di Wenhong's expression changed. He obviously didn't expect Lin Tian to use such a powerful sword attack. Of course, he was still a core disciple of the Seven Mysteries Pavilion. Although this sword attack was powerful, it wasn't enough to make him care. With a clang, a precious long saber appeared in his hand. With a single slash, he shattered Lin Tian's azure thunder sword wind into pieces. Good sword art! Di Wenhong smiled. His long saber shook, creating a sky full of saber shadows. This one is not talented, but I managed to learn the Seven Mysteries Pavilion's strongest martial skill, the Great Mystery Saber Technique. The saber technique is divided into 9 layers. Now that I've comprehended the 4th layer, I hope Brother Lin Tian can enlighten me. I hope that we can both improve our sword and saber techniques. As soon as he finished speaking, the sound of saber resounded. Di Wenhong created a sky full of saber shadows that pressed towards Lin Tian. This is the Seven Mysteries Pavilion's strongest martial skill, the Great Mystery Saber Technique? So powerful! There are too many saber shadows, it's hard to parry. Too strong! Many people whispered. Lin Tian's face was cold and indifferent. He pushed the azure thunder sword skill to the limit. At the same time, the power of fire flowed out. He directly swung the red thunder sword, and with a slash, the violent power of the red thunder sword swept up a hurricane, shattering everything in its path. Di Wenhong frowned, and his saber aura became even stronger. In the blink of an eye, the two had exchanged more than 10 moves. That burning sun sex Lin Tian actually blocked senior brother Di Wenhong's attack? Could it be that he wasn't afraid to fight just now? Was it really because he didn't want to fight? Outside the martial stage, many female disciples of the Valley of the Harp stared at Di Wenhong. These people were really surprised. One had to know that Di Wenhong was a core disciple of the Seven Mysteries Pavilion, and his reputation wasn't small. He was the leader of the Seven Mysteries Pavilion's team this time, but Lin Tian was only an ordinary disciple of the Burning Sun sect. But now, he actually blocked Di Wenhong's attack. This really shocked them. Dang! 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 Inside the martial stage, the saber and sword constantly collided. Lin Tian's face was cold and indifferent. Slash after slash, the light of the red thunder sword shook the sky. Di Wenhong's face sank. The Great Mystery Saber Technique was divided into 9 layers, and he had consecutively slashed out the first 2 layers, but he still couldn't suppress Lin Tian. This made him a little surprised. After all, Lin Tian was only an ordinary inner disciple of the Burning Sun sect. How could an ordinary inner disciple have such a strong battle strength? Junior brother Lin is really unexpectedly strong. Xinyan also wants to ask for advice. A voice sounded. Chapter 249. Many onlookers were surprised by Xinyan's sudden participation, but soon some people cheered. These people didn't know that Xinyan and Lin Tian had a conflict. They only thought that she was here to ask for advice. At this time, only a few female disciples with Xinyan had a slight change in expression. Further away, Jiyu was obviously angry. Too much! After saying that, Jiyu stepped forward. She clearly felt Xinyan's bad intentions. Yu Wuxuang pulled her back. Don't be anxious. Master! Jiyu frowned. Those two are at the 5th heavenly layer. Maybe he can block one of them, but if the two of them attack together, even if he is stronger, it will be difficult to deal with them. Little Yu, don't worry too much. Look at his expression, Yu Wuxuang said. Jiyu looked at the field. Although Lin Tian was forced to retreat, his expression was surprisingly calm. This? Jiyu was stunned. Lin Tian's expression was very calm, as if everything was under control. This made Jiyu very surprised. After all, Lin Tian was only at the 3rd heavenly layer. How could he be so calm in the face of two 5th heavenly layer powerhouses? Yu Wuxuang narrowed her eyes. I am also very curious about what he is relying on. Let's continue watching. In the field, the sword and saber collided. The ear-piercing sound reverberated, causing many people to cover their ears. Lin Tian held the inner spirit sword. The thunder flame sword swept out, slashing out a bright sword light. At the same time, it collided with Di Wahong and Xinyan. At this time, in the eyes of outsiders, he looked a little embarrassed. Facing the two, he kept retreating. Brother Lin is really strong. Take my mysterious 3rd saber. Di Wahong narrowed his eyes. With a loud clang, the long saber in Di Wahong's hand vibrated, and suddenly, a huge astral blade appeared above his head, and a tyrannical Truji fluctuation swept up a fierce wind, causing the many spectators outside the martial stage to feel their hearts palpitate. Lin Tian brandished the heart spirit sword. The blade trembled, and the thunder flame sword force was raised to the limit. He ruthlessly slashed out. Boom! The saber energy and the sword energy collided, and both of them took a few steps back. They were evenly matched. That Lin Tian was able to completely block senior brother Di Wenhong's great mystery 3rd blade. How is this possible? The disciples of the 7 Mysteries Pavilion were all shocked. The many female disciples in the Valley of the Harp outside the martial arts practice field were also surprised. They never thought that an ordinary inner disciple of the Burning Sun sect would be so strong. Di Wenhong's expression also became serious. The first 2 layers of the Great Mystery Blade art had been blocked by Lin Tian. This was already very surprising, but what he didn't expect was that the 3rd layer of the Great Mystery Blade art would also be blocked. Xiao! The sound of something breaking through the air rang out. On the other side, Xinyan moved, slashing at Lin Tian from the side. Xinyan's eyes were filled with obvious hatred. His sword was ruthless and merciless, aiming straight for Lin Tian's vital points. Lin Tian was expressionless as he casually slashed out with the heart spirit sword. In comparison, although Xinyan was also at the 5th layer of the Sea of Consciousness, his battle strength was slightly weaker than Di Wenhong's. Lin Tian held the heart spirit sword, and the thunder flame sword she shot out, colliding with Xinyan. The tyrannical sword intent wantonly scattered. Clang! At this time, Di Wenhong once again pressed forward. Lin Tian's eyes were somewhat cold, but his face was expressionless. In fact, since they were already fighting, he also wanted to see to what extent he could withstand facing 2 Sea of Consciousness 5th layer powerhouses at the same time. In the blink of an eye, the 3 people had already exchanged more than 100 moves. That Lin Tian, fighting 1 against 2, is actually able to withstand for so long without being defeated? At this time, everyone's expression changed. Ling Yi stared at Lin Tian, his face slightly gloomy. Obviously, he was also shocked by Lin Tian's powerful battle strength. Clang! Sword and blade collided, true essence intertwined, and various martial skills were extremely dazzling. Lin Tian faced the 2 people while retreating. At this time, he more or less realized how far he could go. Under the premise of not using the weapon controlling technique, with his current battle strength, facing 1 person was not a problem. However, if he faced 2 people at the same time, it was completely impossible to win. Defeat was only a matter of time. Boom! True essence violently surged, and the three people's attacks became even more shocking. At this time, Lin Tian gradually fell into a disadvantageous position, constantly being forced to retreat by Di Wenhong and Xinyan. In the distance, Su Yu had his hands behind his back. His expression was indifferent, and from time to time, he would reveal a sneer. "Brother Lin, I'm going to use the fourth sword, please be careful," Di Wenhong said. Although he was smiling, a cold light flashed in the depths of his eyes. As his words fell, with a boom, the aura on his body suddenly soared. His whole person seemed to have merged with the long sword in his hand, and the sword light was terrifying. "The third sword!" Xinyan's voice sounded. With a cold light in his eyes, hatred and killing intent, Xinyan pushed the third sword of the White Lotus Sword Codex to the extreme. Suddenly, two majestic waves swept across the martial arts practice field, causing everyone's heart to tremble. "It's impossible for Lin Tian to block this attack. That is inevitable. They are core disciples of two sects after all. Moreover, their cultivation bases are at the fifth heavenly layer of the Sea of Wisdom." Facing such an attack, no matter how strong that Lin Tian is, he can only lose. However, even if he is defeated, Lin Tian can be proud. Facing two core disciples of two sects, he can actually fight until now. He is really too strong. If it's a one-on-one battle, the two of them may not be his opponents. Very likely. Speaking of which, in this scene, Lin Tian won't be in danger, right? The attacks of those two are really... Don't worry, he won't. It's just an exchange of blows. That's true. This battle is really too exciting. Many people stared straight ahead. Di Wenhong's eyes were cold, and his sword aura was becoming more and more terrifying. As for Xinyan, the killing intent in her eyes gradually revealed. After being humiliated by Lin Tian yesterday, she joined this battle to embarrass Lin Tian and take the opportunity to kill Lin Tian. In the end, even if she killed Lin Tian, she could use accident as an excuse. Cut! Xinyan shouted, and sword lotuses flew around her face, rolling towards Lin Tian. At the same time, Di Wenhong's sword aura also pressed down. In an instant, two violent auras erupted like a mountain flood, rushing forward. "Brother Lin, if you can't resist, you must speak immediately so that I can quickly withdraw my sword aura." Di Wenhong smiled. Facing this sword and sword, Lin Tian's face didn't have the slightest change in emotion. "You should think about yourself first." At this time, he didn't want to hold back, and he couldn't hold back anymore. After all, this attack was really terrifying. Clang! As soon as he finished speaking, long swords appeared around him. The sound of swords reverberated, and 15 brilliant swords appeared, all emitting a dazzling sword aura. "This is?" Yu Wuxuang's face suddenly changed, as if she saw something inconceivable. In another direction, the indifference on Su Yu's face disappeared. How is this possible? The 15 brilliant swords vibrated, and like 15 lightning bolts, they rushed out, instantly shattering Di Wenhong's sword aura and shattering Xinyan's sword aura, causing the two to stagger back a dozen steps. 100 Refinements Secret Technique? Di Wenhong's face changed. How can you know the 100 Refinements House's strongest secret technique? Where did you steal it from? Xinyan screamed. At this time, in this place, everyone's face changed. This, 15 swords flying across the sky, it's the 100 Refinements secret technique. He's a disciple of the Burning Sun sect. How can he know that secret technique? The 100 Refinements secret technique was the 100 Refinements House's strongest secret technique, also known as the Four Great Sects' strongest secret technique. It focused entirely on offense, and was known to be invincible in the same realm. In the entire 100 Refinements House, there were only a few people who had the qualifications to learn this secret technique. But now, a Burning Sun sect disciple had actually displayed the 100 Refinements secret technique. Thank you for forcing me to practice with my sword. Now it's my turn to repay you, so don't be polite, Lin Tiantan said coldly. As soon as his words fell, the 15 brilliant swords moved in a crisscross pattern, clanging. Di Wahong and Xinyan's faces changed. One of them was facing 8 swords, while the other was facing 7 swords. These swords attacked from different angles at the same time, and even with their strength, it was difficult for them to resist. In a short moment, they were injured, and blood floated in the air. Di Wahong let out a muffled groan as his shoulder was grazed by a sword. On the other side, Xinyan's situation was even worse. His clothes were torn in an instant, and there were many bloody marks on his body. Staring at this scene, everyone was stunned. Just a moment ago, Lin Tian was in an absolute disadvantage, but in the blink of an eye, the situation changed so quickly. In the blink of an eye, Di Wahong and Xinyan were suppressed, and they had no strength to resist at all. Just now, he didn't use his full strength. Is it really like what he said? Just now, he was using the 2 of them to practice his sword. Many people were shocked. At this time, Lin Tian didn't move, but the 15 brilliant swords were shaking violently, constantly slashing towards Di Wahong and Xinyan. Even though the 2 of them were incomparably powerful, they couldn't resist at all. Brother Lin, the exchange ends here. That's enough. Di Wahong shouted. Why are you in such a hurry? Didn't you want to exchange pointers? This is just the beginning, we can slowly exchange pointers. Lin Tian's expression was calm. There are many senior and junior sisters and senior and junior brothers here watching. Our battle might be able to give them some inspiration. Perhaps some of them might accidentally break through. Just treat it as a contribution. You pooh! A brilliant sword slashed down diagonally, grazing Di Wenhong's right arm, almost cutting it off. On the other side, Xinyan retreated step by step. Facing the 7 brilliant swords, his resistance was getting weaker and weaker, and he was in a very sorry state. Oh right, I forgot about you. Lin Tian swept his gaze over. With a swoosh, as his divine sense moved, the 7 brilliant swords actually formed a small sword array in the air. The momentum of the array suddenly became more shocking, and in an instant, Xinyan was even more exhausted to deal with it. In just a short moment, he was injured again. Lin Tian! You! Pa! A brilliant sword suddenly rushed out, and the back of the sword swept across, like a slap to Xinyan's face. With a bang, Xinyan's whole body was sent flying more than 10 meters away, fiercely crashing into a corner of the arena. P.S. Next Friday, Saturday, and Sunday 3 days of eruption. If there is no accident, 5 updates a day. Chapter 250. Lin Tian was still somewhat lenient. After all, this was the Valley of the Harp. If he were to severely injure or kill someone because of a competition, it would bring a lot of trouble to Yu Wushuang. Therefore, he controlled himself very well. However, even though he showed them some mercy, he wouldn't let them off easily. These 2 people didn't have good intentions. Clang! Sword light flashed, and 8 swords rushed towards Di Wenhong. Di Wenhong resisted with all his strength, using the great mystery blade technique again and again. However, facing 8 swords, it was difficult to deal with. Lin Tian, stop, we've exchanged pointers enough! Di Wenhong shouted. At first, you wanted to exchange pointers and force me to make a move. Now I'm telling you to stop, Lin Tian said indifferently. Saying this, his divine sense moved, and the 8 swords spun and slashed towards Di Wenhong. Di Wenhong's face was gloomy, he was both shocked and angry. Even with his Sea of Knowledge 8th heavenly layer cultivation, it was still very difficult for him to resist 8 swords at the same time. The most important thing was that these 8 swords always attacked him from various angles. Pooh! One of the swords slashed, directly hitting Di Wenhong's chest. You! Staring at Lin Tian, Di Wenhong's face was extremely ugly. Lin Tian's face was indifferent. What's wrong? You are a core disciple of the 7 Mysteries Pavilion. Why are you hiding your strength? Hearing this, Di Wenhong's face became even uglier. Lin Tian was clearly humiliating him. In the distance, Xinyan stood up, her face gloomy, and turned to leave. Coming and going as you please, isn't that not good? Lin Tian now said. As soon as he finished speaking, 7 swords flew over and completely blocked Xinyan's path. One of the swords directly slashed down. Xinyan used the White Lotus sword technique to resist. From the first to the third sword, the tyrannical sword intent shocked many of the surrounding disciples, but the effect was not obvious. This was because every time she used her sword technique, 4 of the 7 swords would retreat, while the other 3 would attack. When the attacking 3 swords were knocked away, the remaining 4 swords would immediately surround them. Therefore, Xinyan did not have the chance to rest at all. Lin Tian! You stole 100 Refinements Workshop's secret martial skill. 100 Refinements Workshop will not let you off! Xinyan shouted. Many people around were moved. Why did these words sound a little different? Didn't you come up here to ask for pointers? Why are you threatening me now? Lin Tianling smiled. As he spoke, he held the inner spirit sword and walked toward Xinyan. With a whoosh, his figure instantly appeared in front of Xinyan. You bang! Lin Tian lifted his leg and kicked Xinyan's lower abdomen, sending him flying several feet away. Looks like the lesson I gave you yesterday was not enough. Just as well, I'll make it up to you today. Lin Tian's voice was a little indifferent. As his words fell, he appeared in front of Xinyan again in the next moment, and kicked out again. Do you think I can't see the killing intent in your eyes? You want to take the opportunity to kill me? Hearing this, there was an uproar. What's going on? Why would Senior Sister Shen want to kill that Lin Tian? Isn't this an exchange of cultivation? Many people were moved and looked at Xinyan in disbelief. Many people began to discuss. Xinyan was a little crazy, and her eyes became ferocious. I want you dead! As she spoke, an even more violent aura rushed out of her body. In this violent genuine qi, everyone clearly felt a clear killing intent. Lin Tianling smiled and the Thunderfire sword shook violently. Buzz! Lightning intertwined, and a chill spread out. A murderous intent far more powerful than Xinyan's was unleashed, which shocked everyone. Even Yu Wushuang, who was far away, was moved. To be able to unleash such a terrifying murderous intent at such a young age and level of cultivation, it was even more powerful than some airborne realm fighters. That's right. He broke into the palace and slaughtered 3 martial arts families. This is the killing intent he accumulated, Yu Wushuang said to herself. As this terrifying killing intent spread, Xinyan trembled and her whole face turned pale. Her spiritual ether instantly collapsed, and the hand holding the sword trembled. This killing intent was completely suppressed by Lin Tian towards Xinyan. The terrifying chill was like a torrent, directly breaking Xinyan's spiritual defense, causing him to be terrified. Get lost! Lin Tianling spat out a word coldly. The inner spirit sword shook, and the sword wind rolled up, directly sending Xinyan flying. With a bang, Xinyan fell 30 feet away in a sorry state. Suddenly, the female disciples of the Valley of the Harp ran over. Senior Sister! Several female disciples were shocked. In the distance, Suyu's eyes were cold. She wanted to make a move several times, but in the end, she held back because she saw Yu Wushuang on the other side. If she really did make a move, she would definitely be stopped by Yu Wushuang. You actually stole the 100 Refinements secret technique of the 100 Refinements workshop. After this, I'll see how you live. Suyu stared at Lin Tian coldly. In the field, Lin Tian felt the cold gaze and turned his head to look. Old witch! Seeing Suyu standing there, he coldly spat out 3 words. Lin Tian's voice was not loud, but Suyu was an airborne realm expert. Naturally, she knew what Lin Tian was talking about. Her face suddenly became gloomier. Lin Tian retracted his gaze and looked at Di Wehong. With a clang, in an instant, 15 long swords were aimed at Di Wehong and all of them rushed over. Brother Lin, quickly stop! Di Wehong shouted. Lin Tian's eyes were indifferent. Learn from each other? Do you think I don't know what you're planning? I'll give you a warning, put away your tricks. The 15 long swords vibrated, leaving sword marks on Di Wehong's body. Lin Tian, stop. It's just a spar, do you want to commit murder? Ling Yi shouted. Moreover, Ling Yi stepped forward, wanting to stop Lin Tian. Get lost. In Lin Tian's hand, the inner spirit sword was raised, and the thunder flame sword swept over forcefully, forcing Ling Yi to take a few steps back. You! Immediately, Ling Ye's face became extremely pale. Lin Tian stood where he was, and the 15 swords circled around Di Wenhong, continuously slashing at him. From time to time, they would leave sword wounds on his body. However, these sword wounds all avoided the vital points, only making Di Wenhong feel intense pain and unspeakable humiliation. They were not a threat to his life at all. Lin Tian, don't go too far. Di Wenhong shouted. Lin Tian smiled. So what if I go too far? As soon as he finished speaking, the swords vibrated, and one of them directly pierced through Di Wenhong's right arm. This time, Di Wenhong could not bear it and finally let out a scream. Many people were stunned. Even though it was supposed to be an exchange of pointers, they had never imagined that things would escalate to such an extent. Senior brother Di. This is too much, stop. Stop. The people of the 7 profound pavilions shouted angrily. Some people even rushed towards Lin Tian, but after taking 3 steps, they were sent flying by Lin Tian's sword. Looking at this scene, many people swallowed their saliva. This was too abnormal. That Di Wenhong, why did he provoke that ruthless person? Did he have nothing better to do? He brought this upon himself. Several Burning Sun sect's inner disciples muttered. When Lin Tian was in the Burning Sun sect, his fierce reputation was extremely widespread, and these inner disciples were very clear. On the martial arts practice field, at this moment, the battle was already one-sided. Di Wenhong screamed from time to time, and his body was covered with sword wounds. With this level of strength, he really thinks he's number 1 in the world. Lin Tianling said. The 15 swords continuously slashed down. His figure flashed, and he arrived in front of Di Wenhong, kicking him horizontally. With a bang, this kick landed directly on the side of Di Wenhong's head, sending him flying 3 zhang away. Senior brother! The 7 Mysteries Pavilion's disciples shouted, and quickly rushed over. There, Di Wenhong fell to the ground, completely unconscious. A group of people helped Di Wenhong up, and glared at Lin Tian with anger. However, they did not dare to say anything, as they were shocked by Lin Tian's fierceness. Without paying attention to the crowd's expressions, Lin Tian put away the 15 swords and walked out of the martial arts practice field. Seeing him walk over, the group of people in front of him instantly jumped out of the way. Damn it! Looking at Lin Tian's back, the 7 Mysteries Pavilion's disciples had ugly expressions. This time, they had lost a lot of face. In an instant, everyone in the martial arts practice field looked at each other in dismay. This brat! Yu Wushuang stared at Lin Tian's departing figure. She first smiled, but then her expression became serious. Glancing at Suyu in the distance, Yu Wushuang said to Jiyu, Xiao Yu, bring him to see me. Is there a problem? Jiyu was puzzled. There is indeed a problem. Go, Yu Wushuang said. Jiyu nodded and chased after Lin Tian's figure. After Lin Tian left the martial arts practice field, the cultivation exchange ended quickly. After all, how could they continue after such a battle? At this time, Lin Tian followed Jiyu to an elegant pavilion in the Valley of the Harp. Yu Wushuang was sitting inside. Senior, is there a problem? Lin Tian asked. Yu Wushuang nodded and said, The technique you used just now, was it the 100 Refinements secret technique of the 100 Refinements workshop? Staring at Lin Tian, Yu Wushuang's expression was serious. No. No? Yu Wushuang frowned. As far as she knew, only the 100 Refinements secret technique could achieve this. Lin Tian shook his head. No. How could I learn the techniques of the 100 Refinements workshop? Yu Wushuang nodded. Indeed, it was impossible for Lin Tian to learn the 100 Refinements secret technique. After thinking for a while, she asked again. Did you use this technique before this? Yes. Lin Tian now told her about his battle with Bai Yunfei. Yu Wushuang said. In short, you have to be careful of the people of the 100 Refinements workshop in the future. I believe that you don't practice the techniques of the 100 Refinements Workshop, but you know a martial technique that's almost the same as the 100 Refinements secret technique. The people of the 100 Refinements Workshop will probably make trouble for you. This cultivation exchange can't continue. In a while, Xiaoyu will take you around the valley. When you go back to the Burning Sun sect tomorrow, you don't have to go with the others. I'll personally send you back. Lin Tianyi was stunned. You're sending me back? Yu Wuxuang's words really surprised him. According to the time, when you came to the Valley of the Harp, Bai Yunfei should have just returned to the 100 Refinements Workshop. He should have already told the owner of the 100 Refinements Workshop about everything. He might have even alarmed the elders of the Burning Sun sect. Yu Wuxuang said. The 100 Refinements secret technique is known as the strongest technique of the 4 great schools. You know a technique similar to the 100 Refinements secret technique, so the 100 Refinements Workshop won't let you go easily. Using this as an excuse, I'm afraid that when you return to the Burning Sun sect, there will be a flying powerhouse from the 100 Refinements Workshop waiting for you. If that's really the case, you'll definitely die. Lin Tianyi was shocked. He hadn't thought about this before, but now that he heard Yu Wuxuang mention it, his expression changed slightly. Indeed, the weapon manipulation technique he practiced was too similar to the 100 Refinements secret technique. Even if he knew that it wasn't the 100 Refinements secret technique, the 100 Refinements Workshop wouldn't think so. Taking a step back, even if the 100 Refinements Workshop knew that their techniques had never been leaked, they still wouldn't tolerate someone using a technique similar to the 100 Refinements secret technique. It was very likely that the 100 Refinements Workshop would make a move against him. Don't worry too much. Once I send you back to the Burning Sun sect, there won't be any more problems. Yu Wuxuang said. Although the current head of the Burning Sun sect and your master aren't blood brothers, they're closer than blood brothers. He'll definitely do his best to protect you. After you return to the Burning Sun sect, as long as you don't leave the mountain, the people of the 100 Refinements Workshop won't be able to do anything to you. Lin Tian nodded, bowed seriously, and expressed his gratitude to Yu Wuxuang. The head of a sect had a very high status, yet she was going to personally send him back to the Burning Sun sect. This kindness was not light. Most importantly, this wasn't his request, but Yu Wuxuang herself. This made him feel even more grateful. It's fine. You're the disciple of an old drunkard, and you'll be Little Yu's future husband. It's only natural that I help you, Yu Wuxuang said. After leaving Yu Wuxuang's place, Lin Tian frowned, thinking about what Yu Wuxuang had just said to him. What did Master say to you? You've been pulling a long face ever since you came out. Jiyu asked. When Yu Wuxuang and Lin Tian were talking, Jiyu wasn't allowed to listen. She didn't want Jiyu to worry about Lin Tian's safety and affect her cultivation. Therefore, Jiyu didn't know what the two were talking about in the room. It's nothing. Lin Tian quickly relaxed his brows, and a smile appeared on his face. Jiyu said, Oh. Although she found something strange, she didn't ask further since Lin Tian didn't want to talk about it. After that, she led Lin Tian around the Valley of the Harp. They passed by some quiet pavilions, some secluded green forests, and some cultivation areas. Not long after, they arrived in front of a stone wall at the back of the Valley of the Harp. Looking at it, the stone wall seemed to be quite large, and carved with lifelike stone lotuses. This is the White Lotus Sword Wall, one of the most important places in the Valley of the Harp. Jiyu said. Lin Tianwei was stunned. Then why did you bring me here? I'm not from the Valley of the Harp. Master said it doesn't matter. She can take you anywhere in the Valley of the Harp. Jiyu said. Lin Tian said. Oh. Since Yu Wuxuang said so, he didn't mind. The sun was setting. Lin Tian stared at the stone wall for a few dozen breaths, and then prepared to leave for the next place. However, at this moment, his knowledge sea suddenly shook. He saw that the originally ordinary stone lotuses on the stone wall in front of him seemed to come alive at this moment, swaying slightly. Chapter 251. Lin Tian was a little surprised. It was just a stone wall, but at this time, the stone lotuses on the stone wall actually moved in his field of vision. They swayed as if they were real lotuses, and there were even specks of brilliance. At this time, his sea of consciousness shook, and huge waves suddenly appeared. In an instant, Lin Tian was completely stunned. Ji Yu saw that Lin Tianyi did not move and was slightly curious. However, in the next moment, Ji Yu was slightly surprised because Lin Tian's glabella suddenly lit up. Moreover, there was an obviously powerful fluctuation of vital essence on his body. Ji Yu did not know what was happening to Lin Tian at this moment, but she knew that this was a very important moment for Lin Tian. Immediately, she retreated a few feet away from Lin Tian and then cautiously scanned the surroundings to protect Lin Tian. Lin Tian stared ahead. The stone lotuses swayed and shone brightly. Gradually, his sea of consciousness shook even more violently. At this moment, the scene in his field of vision completely changed. Many real white lotuses intertwined in the surroundings, swaying slightly under the sunlight and dancing quietly in the breeze. Lin Tian felt that at this moment, his soul was somewhat shaken. A solid sword essence! Lin Tian was shocked. At this time, he clearly felt an extremely majestic sword essence on the stone wall. It was so strong that it was somewhat frightening. Buzz! Suddenly, in his field of vision, the white lotuses swayed even more violently, and lotus petals flew up one by one. Lin Tian stared straight ahead. Then, with a clang, the lotus petals flew up and turned into rays of sword light. These sword lights circled in Lin Tian's field of vision, clanging like countless birds flapping their wings. In the next moment, Lin Tian was shocked again because these dense sword lights were all aimed at him, and all of them were shooting towards him. Lin Tian's heart skipped a beat. However, he instinctively stood where he was and stared at the boundless sword light that was rushing towards him. Within these sword lights, he could feel a sword aura that was extremely powerful and frightening. Whoosh! 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 The dense sword lights intertwined, and the lotus petals fluttered, rushing into his glabella. Lin Tian felt a slight pain in his glabella. In the next moment, his sea of consciousness was filled with sword lights, and these sword lights occupied his entire sea of consciousness in an instant. Then, not long after, these sword lights all moved and slashed towards his sea of consciousness one by one, as if they were going to shatter his sea of consciousness. Staring at this scene, Lin Tian was surprisingly calm, and stared straight at the sword lights that were slashing down. It was even to the extent that he automatically withdrew a strand of his divine sense to move against the slashing force of these sword lights, and he started to deduce the formidable sword insight that resided within them. Clang! The dense sword lights continued to slash down, slashing his divine consciousness. Lin Tian was shocked. His sea of consciousness was indeed slashed, but there was no intense pain as expected. On the contrary, every time his sea of consciousness was slashed, he felt his divine consciousness become stronger. This feeling was similar to when he took the spirit-forging pill. No, it was even more amazing than that time. Buzz! The sword lights were bright and clanging. Then, Lin Tian's entire sea of consciousness was in turmoil. Lin Tian watched all this. As the sword lights continued to fall, he found that his divine consciousness was becoming crystal clear, and his sea of consciousness was gradually expanding and becoming more vast. In just a few dozen breaths, Lin Tian found that his divine consciousness had more than doubled, and his cultivation had also climbed to the middle of the third sky of the sea of consciousness in an instant. At this time, the sword lights in his sea of consciousness were still slashing down. Sword! It's all swords! Lin Tian muttered to himself. His divine consciousness slashed down with the dense sword lights, and a strange and vague trajectory gradually appeared in his mind. As his divine consciousness continued to chase after the dense sword lights, this trajectory became clearer and clearer. Lin Tian felt that this trajectory seemed to be a powerful sword technique. Bo! Suddenly, a crisp sound was heard. Lin Tian had been looking at his sea of consciousness the entire time. Looking in the direction of the sound, he saw a white lotus flower growing out from a certain location within his sea of consciousness. Green leaves grew out from both sides of the lotus flower. This lotus was very small at first, but as the endless sword light slashed down, this white lotus gradually grew bigger. Bow! 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 Soon, the same sound was heard. In just a moment, white lotuses appeared in Lin Tian's sea of consciousness, almost covering the entire sea of consciousness. At this time, the sword light that rushed into his glabella had completely cut into his sea of consciousness. Lin Tianji felt that his divine consciousness had become much stronger. The white lotuses took root in his sea of consciousness, causing his divine consciousness to become extremely calm and stable. Also, at this time, the sword essence that he was chasing with his divine consciousness became extremely clear, and the vague trajectory of the sword momentum became completely clear. White Lotus Sword Manual! Lin Tian's heart skipped a beat. At this moment, the complete White Lotus Sword Manual appeared in his sea of consciousness. 1. As this sword momentum became clear, his entire body's essence, chi, and spirit soared, and the tyrannical waves of vital essence involuntarily surged. Beams of bright light rushed out and condensed into a huge white lotus above his head in an instant. At the same time, with him as the center, a radius of 30 feet was also filled with vital essence lotuses. This is? Not far away, Ji looked at this scene and was completely stunned. Almost at the same time, in the Valley of the Harp, a few of the giants were all shocked. In just a moment, 5 figures flashed over, each of them exuding an extremely powerful aura. 5 Zephyr powerhouses. The 6 giants of the Valley of the Harp, except for the Supreme Elder, all 5 of them were here. Junior. Su Yu's voice was cold as she slapped her palm over. Yu Wushwang's face darkened. She slashed out with her sword and forced Su Yu to retreat more than 10 feet. If you dare to attack again, don't blame me for being merciless. Yu Wushwang's face was a little cold. Su Yu was older than her and had competed with her for the position of Valley Master. They had always been at odds with each other. Usually, for the sake of the peaceful development of the Valley of the Harp, she did not lower herself to Su Yu's level. But now, Su Yu had repeatedly tried to kill Lin Tian, which made her feel a little cold. Su Yu's face was gloomy as she said angrily, "This is the most important place in the Valley of the Harp. You actually allowed an outsider to enter here and spy on the secrets of the Valley of the Harp. Now you're stopping me from suppressing him. Are you trying to bring disaster to the Valley of the Harp?" The other 3 elders who were standing in the sky frowned as they looked at Yu Wushwang. He's Li Changfeng's disciple. He can go anywhere in the Valley of the Harp. Yu Wushwang said indifferently. You. Su Yu's face suddenly turned green, and her eyes were burning with anger. In the sky, the other 3 elders were shocked. Valley Master, is this young man really Li Changfeng's disciple? One of them asked. Yu Wushwang's expression was calm as she nodded. The frown on the 3 elders' faces disappeared. That person actually took in a disciple, and this is such a familiar scene. Staring at Lin Tian, whose eyes were still closed, the 3 elders' eyes were shining brightly. As expected of that man's disciple. He's really a monster. One of them sighed. They looked deeply at Lin Tianyi, then nodded to Yu Wushwang and left in the blink of an eye. Su Yu's face was cold as she finally left with a flick of her sleeve. Master. Ji Yu shouted. Yu Wushwang nodded and walked down from the sky to Ji Yu's side. Staring at Lin Tian in front of her, Yu Wushwang's eyes flashed with a faint light. She was surprised and helpless. Soon an hour passed. The aura on Lin Tian's body gradually subsided, and he finally opened his eyes. At this time, his sea of consciousness had expanded a lot, and his divine sense was crystal clear and much stronger. His cultivation had directly climbed to the peak of the 3rd layer of the sea of consciousness. As long as he cultivated a little, he could easily step into the 4th layer of the sea of consciousness. You're awake? Yu Wushwang said. Lin Tian turned around and saw Yu Wushwang. He was stunned for a moment, then bowed. After a pause, he said, That, Senior, I accidentally found the White Lotus Sword Manual. At this time, not only had his divine sense become much stronger, but he also had the complete White Lotus Sword Manual, the Valley of the Harp's secret technique. He naturally would not hide this from Yu Wuxuang. After all, Yu Wuxuang was the Valley of the Harp's Valley Master. Ah? Next to him, Ji Yu was a little surprised. Lin Tian had comprehended the Valley of the Harp's strongest cultivation technique. Yu Wuxuang, on the other hand, wasn't surprised. She merely nodded her head indifferently. Clearly, she already knew. Staring at Lin Tian, her expression became a little more serious. You can cultivate on your own, but you must never spread it, understand? Lin Tian was stunned for a moment, then said solemnly, Senior, don't worry. Lin Tian swears that if this gets out, I will be destroyed by the heavens. Lin Tian knew how important the White Lotus Sword Manual was to the Valley of the Harp. Once it got out, it would definitely be a huge blow to the Valley of the Harp. It could be said to be devastating. I believe you. Yu Wuxuang nodded. Ji Yu was a little puzzled and asked, Master, you seem to have known from the beginning that he had comprehended the White Lotus Sword Manual. In that case, the other elders should have known as well, but other than Elder Su, the other three did not make things difficult for Lin Tian. Could this be? After a pause, Ji Yu said, Is it related to his master? Lin Tianyi was stunned. The other elders also knew, but other than Su Yu, no one made things difficult for him? This was a little too strange. After all, he had comprehended the Valley of the Harp's secret technique. Senior, this? Lin Tian could not help but look at Yu Wuxuang. Yu Wuxuang nodded. This stone wall was left behind by the ancestors of the Valley of the Harp. Back then, our Valley of the Harp could barely be called one of the 4 major sections. Our strength was very weak, because at that time, the White Lotus Sword Manual was not complete. There were many places missing, especially the 9th layer, which was the most severely missing. Until that year, Li Changfeng came to the Valley of the Harp as a guest. It was also here that at the age of 20, he comprehended the complete White Lotus Sword Manual from the stone wall, and engraved it into a jade scroll and handed it to the master of the Valley of the Harp, who is now the highest elder. The complete White Lotus Sword Manual. It should not be difficult for you to imagine how important it was to the Valley of the Harp. At that time, the highest elder almost fainted from joy. It was also after that, with the complete White Lotus Sword Manual, the strength of the Valley of the Harp rapidly increased. From barely being called one of the 4 major sects, it is now no weaker than the 7 Mysteries Pavilion and the Burning Sun sect. Only the 100 Refinements Workshop can slightly suppress us. All of this is thanks to Li Changfeng. Hearing this, Lin Tian and Ji Yu were both greatly shocked. From the looks of it, this was indeed a great kindness. Yu Wuxuang looked at Lin Tian. So, as the disciple of an old drunkard, you can freely walk around the Valley of the Harp. Even if you want to learn the White Lotus Sword Manual, you can do so because your master knows the White Lotus Sword Manual. If you really want to learn it, your master can teach it to you, and our Valley of the Harp does not have the qualifications to stop you. Rather than that, our Valley of the Harp passing it down to you is the same. There is no substantial difference. Chapter 252. Reading on a mobile phone. Lin Tian and Ji Yu were both a little surprised when they heard Yu Wuxuang's words. They never thought that an old drunkard would have done such a great favor for the Valley of the Harp back then. Book.net. Ji Yu snickered. You got a great bargain. Lin Tian was speechless. Yu Wuxuang looked at Lin Tian and sighed. How should I put it? You two are indeed master and disciple. Your master comprehended the complete White Lotus Sword Manual here back then. I didn't expect that after so many years, you would come here and comprehend it as well. That's true. Ji Yu smiled. Lin Tian was a little speechless and embarrassed. He looked at Ji Yu and suddenly felt a little puzzled. He asked Yu Wuxuang, Speaking of which, didn't you say that Ji Yu was very talented? Why didn't she feel anything when she looked at the stone wall? Because she has already cultivated the complete White Lotus Sword Manual. Naturally, she wouldn't feel anything from the stone wall, Yu Wuxuang said. Lin Tianyi was stunned. He thought about it, and found that it made sense. Yu Wuxuang once again instructed Lin Tian not to spread the white lotus sword mantra. Then she said, "Let little you take you to other places. I have to go and discuss this matter with the Taishang elder. At this time tomorrow, come find me again." After saying that, Yu Wusheng left. Jiyu then took Lin Tian to other places in the Valley of the Harp. They only separated at night. Lin Tian went back to his room and closed his eyes. The White Lotus Sword Manual's cultivation methods and sword techniques reverberated in his mind over and over again. "The airborne realm is really powerful," Lin Tian thought to himself. The White Lotus Sword Manual at the airborne realm was a combination of cultivation methods and martial arts. There was even the White Lotus Phantom Movement technique, which was very extraordinary. Lin Tian scanned it from beginning to end. In the end, his gaze still locked onto the 9 sword moves of the 100 Refinements sword canon. He discovered that the 9 sword moves were all extremely exquisite, far stronger than the Azure Thunder sword technique. Speaking of which, an old drunkard is pretty good. Back then, he actually helped the Valley of the Harp organize the complete White Lotus Sword Manual. I wonder if that old guy practiced this sword manual. Lin Tian muttered to himself. Come to think of it, it had been 2 months since he last saw an old drunkard, and he missed him. After a pause, Lin Tian shook his head and lay down to rest. The night passed quickly. The next morning, led by Lu Jie, several outer disciples of the Valley of the Harps sent them off. The disciples of the 7 Mysteries Pavilion and the Burning Sun sect left the Valley of the Harp one after another. The 7 Mysteries Pavilion did not care about Lin Tian. As for the Burning Sun sect, Ling Yi disliked Lin Tian even more. Naturally, he did not care about when Lin Tian would return to the Burning Sun sect. He directly took the rest of the people and left. On this day, Lin Tian walked in the Valley of the Harp. Of course, Ji Yu accompanied him. When this scene fell into the eyes of Lu Jie and the others, many people came up to him and asked him all sorts of questions. Lin Tian also discovered that in the entire Valley of the Harp, only Xingyan and Ji Yu did not get along well. The other disciples of the Valley of the Harp liked Ji Yu very much and got along very well. As such, he was able to set his mind at ease. Soon, the sky became a little dark. Lin Tian arrived outside Yu Wusheng's room. With a creak, the door opened by itself. Let's go. Yu Wusheng walked out. Thank you for your trouble, senior. Lin Tian andao. Yu Wusheng waved her hand and told Ji Yu a few things. Then, she took Lin Tian and left from the other side of the Valley of the Harp. About 3 days later, Yu Wusheng brought Lin Tian to the stone steps of the Burning Sun sect. Okay, I won't go up. After returning to the sect, you should seize the time to cultivate and step into the realm of flying. With your aptitude, I think it will take you at most 2 years, Yu Wusheng said. Lin Tian sincerely expressed his thanks again, and then walked up to the Burning Sun sect. Yu Wusheng stood in place until Lin Tian boarded the Burning Sun sect, and then left. At this time, a purple-robed old man walked out from behind an old tree. I didn't think that Yu Wusheng would actually send that bastard all the way back to the Burning Sun sect. This old man was an elder of the 100 Refinements workshop. After learning that Lin Tian went to the Valley of the Harp, he waited on the road from the Valley of the Harp to the Burning Sun sect. But he didn't expect that the master of the Valley of the Harp, Yu Wusheng, would actually personally escort Lin Tian back to the Burning Sun sect. It seems that I can only force the Burning Sun sect to hand him over. With a low voice, the old man quietly left. After walking up the Burning Sun sect, Lin Tian went to the duty hall because he needed to register his return. You're willing to come back? Puan smiled. Lin Tian was a little puzzled. What do you mean? Isn't the Valley of the Harp full of beautiful female disciples? I thought you were staying in the land of warmth. Puan teased. Lin Tian. Okay, I'm too lazy to ask why you came back later than the others. Ling Yi, that brat, fiercely complained about you. Puan smiled. On the way back you didn't stop arguing with him, right? Who cares about him? Lin Tian andao. Puan waved his hand. Okay, go do your own thing. Lin Tian nodded, and then left the duty hall, walking out of his residence. Along the way, many disciples saw Lin Tian with a respectful expression. Many outer disciples even took the initiative to greet him. In this regard, Lin Tian didn't think too highly of himself. As long as someone came to greet him, he would politely respond with a smile. As he walked, Lin Tian saw an eyesore. The burning sun sex deacon, Shushang. "You can actually come back alive, your luck is really good," Shushang said coldly. "Even if your whole family is dead, I will still live well." Lin Tian andao. After saying that, he didn't look at Shushang anymore and walked away. Staring at Lin Tian's back, Shushang's face was ashen, and his eyes were cold. "Little bastard, you won't live for long. The 100 Refinements Square won't let you go. Just wait for your death." With a low voice, Shushang walked in the opposite direction. When Lin Tian returned to his residence, the sky had already darkened. Lin Tian didn't rest. Instead, he closed his eyes and began to cultivate the 4 extreme meridians. In the Valley of the Harp, he had comprehended the complete White Lotus Sword manual. His knowledge sea had undergone a baptism, and his cultivation had reached the peak of the 3rd heavenly layer. Now, after returning to the sect, he began to cultivate immediately, preparing to rush to the 4th heavenly layer in one fell swoop. Buzz! Faint silver light lingered and intertwined around his body. At this time, he didn't use the spirit refining rune. Instead, he only unfolded 3 spirit gathering runes, drawing in the rich spiritual energy of heaven and earth and the power of stars. Then, he seriously immersed himself in the cultivation of his knowledge sea. At this time, his knowledge sea was filled with white lotuses. As he began to cultivate his knowledge sea, these white lotuses swayed slightly. Lin Tian calmed his mind and focused. Between his eyebrows, light flashed little by little. The consciousness in his knowledge sea trembled slightly with the swaying of the white lotuses. At this moment, his knowledge sea wasn't as turbulent as it was when he took the spirit-forging pill. Instead, there were only wisps of ripples spreading out, and with each ripple, his spiritual energy grew stronger. "Strange, these white lotuses don't disappear?" Lin Tian frowned. When he was comprehending the White Lotus Sword mantra in the Serene Valley, white lotuses had appeared in his sea of consciousness. He originally thought that it was just a strange phenomenon that occurred when he was comprehending the White Lotus Sword mantra and that it would soon disappear. Unexpectedly, after so long, these white lotuses were still in his sea of consciousness and showed no signs of disappearing. Lin Tian pondered for a moment, but in the end, he still couldn't figure it out. "Forget it, next time I see an old drunkard I'll ask that old guy," he muttered to himself. After taking a deep breath, Lin Tian continued to cultivate. In the darkness, a faint silver brilliance intertwined around his body. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth surged, and the power of stars fell with it, surrounding his entire body. In this way, his cultivation of divine sense became much smoother than that of ordinary people. About 6 hours later, a majestic force burst out from his body. At that moment, Lin Tian only felt his senses become slightly stronger. He looked into his sea of consciousness and discovered that it had expanded a little. The white lotuses in his sea of consciousness had become even more lustrous, and there was a faint glow circulating around them. Even his sea of consciousness was covered in a layer of white light, making it seem very hazy. "4th layer of knowledge sea," Lin Tian muttered to himself. In his eyes, 2 rays of light flashed. After reaching the 4th layer of knowledge sea, his knowledge sea became stronger, and his spiritual sense became more sensitive. At the same time, the true essence in his body naturally became more vigorous. Lin Tian clenched his fists, only to feel that his battle strength had increased several times in an instant. "Who?" Exhaling a mouthful of turbid air, Lin Tian calmed his heart and closed his eyes again. He took out a dozen essence-fortifying pills from the stone ring, swallowed them, and once again operated the 4 extremes scripture. Essence-fortifying pills were very useful for sorting out true essence. Lin Tian relied on essence-fortifying pills to sort out his true essence and stabilize his current realm. In the blink of an eye, the night passed. The next day, Lin Tian got up early to wash up, face the morning sun, and then went to the celestial river tower. With his true essence sorted out and his realm consolidated, he wanted to rely on the power of the celestial river tower to stabilize his knowledge sea. Entering the celestial river tower, Lin Tian spread out his knowledge sea and directly broke through the first layer of the celestial river tower to reach the second layer. Then, he spread out his knowledge sea and broke through the second and third layers of the celestial river tower to reach the fourth layer. As soon as he entered the fourth layer, Lin Tian shook violently, as if a big stone had hit his head. Looking up, Yang Kai saw a magnificent starry river above the fourth floor of the celestial river pagoda. The starry river was so dense that it was frightening. Mysterious arc-shaped waves were constantly pressing down on him like sharp blades, giving off an astonishing pressure. The pressure in the fourth layer of the celestial river tower is much stronger than the third layer, Lin Tian thought to himself. Without thinking much, Lin Tian quickly sat down cross-legged and released his knowledge sea to resist the invisible impact falling from the celestial river tower. As his knowledge sea shook, his knowledge sea also released his knowledge sea and pressed forward. Cultivating one's knowledge sea in the celestial river tower was to use one's knowledge sea to resist the impact falling from the celestial river tower, and then split it apart to hone one's knowledge sea. Lin Tian released his knowledge sea to resist the impact falling from the fourth layer of the celestial river tower, but he only felt that it took a lot of effort. Buzz! Chapter 253. Reading on a mobile phone. Lin Tian was shocked. The force of impact from the river of stars was invisible, and he could only see the waves by relying on his divine sense. Moreover, he could only rely on his divine sense to push the waves towards the river of stars, but he couldn't destroy them. But now, the lotus petals that floated out from his sea of knowledge didn't just push them away, they even directly shattered some of them. This kind of impact can be said to be similar to the existence of divine sense. These lotus petals can actually cut divine sense? Lin Tian was shocked. Intersection. Until now, he had never heard of a method that could cut divine sense, at least not under the celestial reaching realm. Staring at the star river above, Lin Tian was a little scared. Taking a deep breath, he closed his eyes and took the initiative to communicate with the white lotuses in his sea of consciousness. Suddenly, the white lotuses swayed and broke. Lotus petals floated out of them and cut toward the star river under his mind. Chi! 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 The lotus petals floated out and cut the invisible impact falling from the star river, cutting a gap in it. Lin Tian was moved. He took out the lotus petals again and kept cutting them forward. Sizzling sounds continued to ring out as the formless impact from the river of stars was continuously shattered. However, gradually, the impact from the river of stars became much stronger. It was difficult for the lotus petals to shatter, and they were unable to advance any further. These lotus petals can cut the impact falling from the star river, but it still depends on my own cultivation, Lin Tian thought to himself. After a pause, Lin Tian took a deep breath, stood up, and left the Star River Pagoda with his divine sense. At this moment, he was eager to try what kind of power the white lotuses in his sea of consciousness had and whether they could be used in a battle. Walking out of the Star River Pagoda, he didn't hesitate and soon came to the Demon Sealing Gorge. Roar! Awoo! Thousands of feet deep in the Demon Sealing Gorge, the roars of demonic beasts kept coming out, and the air was filled with a strong demonic aura. Lin Tian looked around and soon found a 7th-level demonic beast, the iron-scaled lion. The iron-scaled lion was at least 6 meters tall, and was easily angered. In front of a human, it was simply a colossus, extremely frightening. When Lin Tian saw the iron-scaled lion, he did not hesitate. He stepped in front of it, and raised his hand to punch it. The iron-scaled lion was enraged by the pain. It swiped its claw at Lin Tian. Lin Tian retreated, using the yin and yang liang to dodge. At the same time, light flickered between his eyebrows, and several lotus petals swept out. The lotus petals seemed to be as light as a feather, but in the blink of an eye, it pierced into the head of the iron-scaled lion. Roar! Suddenly, the iron scale lion let out a miserable howl and fell to the ground with a thump, its body twitching uncontrollably. It can be used in battle. Lin Tianwei was delighted. However, Lin Tian was a little surprised because the iron scale lion's cries were really miserable. Looking at it up close, the iron scale lion's eyes were bloodshot and saliva was dripping from the corner of its mouth as if it was having epilepsy. Lin Tian's heart shook. Were those few lotus petals' offensive power so strong? In any case, this iron-scaled lion was a powerful demonic beast comparable to a spiritual sea cultivator. Lin Tian stood guard not far from the iron-scaled lion, observing its reaction. He heard the iron-scaled lion's cries getting weaker and weaker. After a few minutes, it finally got better and struggled to stand up from the ground. At this time, when it looked at Lin Tian again, the iron-scaled lion's eyes were no longer angry. Instead, they were filled with fear. It turned around and fled. Lin Tian was stunned. The iron-scaled lion, known for its belligerence, actually fled after being hit. Shaking his head, Lin Tian continued to walk deeper into the demon's ceiling gorge. Not long after, he encountered a flaming eagle. It was an 8th-level demonic beast, comparable to a human cultivator at the 4th level of the spiritual sea. He took a step forward, clenched his fist, and swung it. The flaming eagle was furious. A human dared to attack it like this. It opened its mouth and a shocking flame was spat out. The flame's temperature was frighteningly high. In an instant, it ignited a nearby patch of old wood, burning it rapidly. Lin Tian frowned. His spiritual sea shook, and lotus petals once again floated out, slashing toward the flaming eagle like swords. The flaming eagle opened its mouth and spat out another stream of flame. The flame instantly engulfed the lotus petals, causing Lin Tian to frown. However, in the next moment, his expression changed again. The lotus petals he sent out were not affected by the flame at all. Their speed did not change, as if they had not encountered anything. They passed through the raging flames directly and slashed into the flaming eagle's head. Awoo! Just like the iron-scaled lion, the flaming eagle let out a miserable cry and fell to the ground with a bang. Lin Tian looked over, only to see that just like the iron-scaled lion, the flaming eagle's entire body was twitching, saliva dripping from its mouth, and its eyes were bloodshot. At the same time, there was another similarity between them, and that was that there was not a single wound on their bodies. This caused Lin Tian's eyes to flicker as a bright light swiftly flashed across them. Could it be that this white lotus directly attacked their brain nerves? Lin Tian's expression changed. Every living thing had a brain nerve, and all the reactions of all living things were basically related to the brain nerve. Therefore, the importance of the brain nerve was self-evident. It was the same as the heart. When the brain nerve was attacked, the pain was unimaginable. Once the brain nerve was damaged, the living thing would die without a doubt. For cultivators above the spiritual sea realm, the brain nerve was born in the spiritual sea and integrated with it. At this time, the spiritual sea became the most important part of the human body. Lin Tian imagined what had happened in the Xinghe Pagoda. The white lotus could cut through the invisible force falling from the Xinghe Pagoda. By inference, it could also attack the spiritual sea. Lin Tian could not help but widen his eyes. It seemed that the white lotus in his spiritual sea was terrifying. After a pause, Lin Tian suddenly remembered that the white lotus he had summoned just now seemed to be completely unaffected by the flaming eagle's flames. It was not hindered in any way. This made him think of a possibility. Could these white lotus petals be the same as the invisible force in the Xinghe Pagoda? Ordinary forces can't stop them? Thinking of this, Lin Tian summoned the white lotus petals and slashed them in all directions. When the white lotus petals encountered tangible trees or stones, they were not hindered and directly passed through them. The trees and stones were not damaged in the slightest, as if the lotus petals were illusory. After quietly pondering for a moment, Lin Tian controlled the white lotus petals to attack him, while he took out the heart spirit sword and slashed out bolts of lightning sword light to block Lin Tian's attack. Soon after, he discovered that this method was completely useless. In the end, he tried to summon his spiritual sea. Only then was he barely able to stop the oncoming lotus petals. Sure enough, only the spiritual sea can stop this white lotus, Lin Tian muttered to himself. After scanning the demon-sealing gorge, Lin Tian walked to other places to find more demonic beasts to fight. Among them, he had experimented with Class 1 demonic beasts to Class 8 demonic beasts. The result was that all demonic beasts below Class 7 died tragically after being attacked by his white lotus. Although Class 7 demonic beasts and Class 8 demonic beasts could resist, they could not withstand too many attacks. He fought with a powerful peak Class 7 demonic beast, a rainbow-armored leopard. After using the same attack 4 times in a row, the rainbow-armored leopard died. So powerful! Lin Tian was pleasantly surprised. He never imagined that the white lotus in his spiritual sea would give him such a pleasant surprise. Taking a deep breath, Lin Tian stared into the distance, and stepped out again to find more powerful demonic beasts to practice his white lotus attack. Meanwhile, in another place, the 100 Refinements Workshop. Because the 100 Refinements Workshop controlled the 100 Refinements secret technique, it was recognized as the strongest among the 4 major sects. There were many geniuses in the sect. On this day, 2 guests came to the 100 Refinements Workshop. The 7 Mysteries Pavilion, Yijingshang. The Valley of the Harp, Suyu. Is there something you need? The owner of the 100 Refinements Workshop welcomed them with a faint smile in a secluded pavilion. Yijingshang narrowed his eyes and said, Not long ago, my disciple went to the Valley of the Harp and discovered that a little bastard of the Burning Sun sect actually controlled your sect's 100 Refinements secret technique. I wonder if Owner Ge knows about this. The owner of the 100 Refinements Workshop was called Ge Fengming. His eyes narrowed when he heard Yijingshang's words. Elder Su, could it be that you've come for this as well? The owner of the 100 Refinements Workshop looked at Suyu. Suyu nodded. Of course. Suyu paused for a moment before a dim light flashed in her eyes. She said, May I know what Owner Ge thinks about this matter? This old lady feels that this bastard has secretly learned your sect's secret technique and should be killed. A bright light flashed in the eyes of the owner of the 100 Refinements Workshop. Soon after, he smiled. To be honest, my 100 Refinements Workshop is already aware of this matter. I heard that when that bastard went to the Valley of the Harp to pay a visit, we secretly sent people to capture him. Unfortunately, when that bastard returned to the Burning Sun sect, the owner of the Valley of the Harp personally escorted him. Although the people sent by my 100 Refinements Workshop were not weaker than the owner of the Valley of the Harp, we did not take action in order to maintain harmony with the Valley of the Harp. Su Yu's expression turned cold. That bitch Yu Wushuang actually personally escorted that bastard. Su Yu clenched her teeth. Yijingshang's eyes flickered before he said, In that case, what does Owner Ge plan to do next? Hearing this, Suyu also looked at the owner of the 100 Refinements Workshop. Lin Tian had once killed Jiang Renwen in front of Yijingshang. This caused Yijingshang to lose a lot of face. This time, his direct disciple, Di Wenhong, had also been seriously injured by Lin Tian. Yijingshang naturally wanted to kill Lin Tian. As for Suyu, she was in the same situation as Yijingshang. Her reputation had been damaged several times because of Lin Tian. She also wanted to get rid of Lin Tian. The owner of the 100 Refinements Workshop said, The 100 Refinements secret technique is extremely important to my 100 Refinements Workshop. No matter what, my 100 Refinements Workshop must retrieve it. In a few days, us old fellows will personally visit the Burning Sun sect and ask for it. As he spoke, the owner of the 100 Refinements Workshop looked at Yijingshang and Suyu. The two of you have come at the right time. May I know if the two of you can help? My 100 Refinements Workshop will give you sufficient benefits. Yijingshang and Suyu looked at each other and frowned. I'm afraid the Burning Sun sect will not give it to us. Suyu shook her head. The owner of the 100 Refinements Workshop said, If they don't give it to us, we'll snatch it by force. The secret technique of my 100 Refinements Workshop must not fall into the hands of others. Snatch it by force? Yijingshang said. I'm afraid that's not very likely. The Burning Sun sect also has an extremely powerful mountain defense array. Once it's activated, entering it rashly will only lead to disaster. Suyu nodded as well. Don't worry. There are also people in the Burning Sun sect who wish for that evil creature to be killed. They will help us, the owner of the 100 Refinements Workshop said. Yi Jingshang and Suyu were moved. Are you serious? Of course, the owner of the 100 Refinements Workshop said. Yi Jingshang and Suyu looked at each other and nodded at the same time. All right, I'll follow you to the Burning Sun sect, Yi Jingshang said. Suyu nodded as a cold light flickered in her eyes. The owner of the 100 Refinements Workshop laughed. Thank you, elders. After this matter is completed, the 100 Refinements Workshop will definitely give you sufficient benefits. Burning Sun Sect, Demons Sealing Gorge. Lin Tian constantly searched for powerful demon beasts to battle. His control of the White Lotus in his knowledge sea was becoming more and more skillful. Soon, for hours passed. All right, Lin Tian secretly said as he wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. He operated the 4 extremes scripture and recovered his true essence on the spot. Then, he returned to the Burning Sun sect. Chapter 254. Reading on a mobile phone. Staring at the green-robed old man, Lin Tianwei frowned slightly. This person should be Ling Ye's master, Elder 2 of the sect. After a pause, Lin Tian didn't stop and continued towards the Burning Sun sect. Stop! A cold shout rang out. Ling Yi obviously noticed Lin Tian and blocked in front of Lin Tian. Not far away, the green-robed old man glanced over and didn't react. Get out of the way! Lin Tiantan said coldly. Ling Yi snorted and didn't talk nonsense. He directly punched at Lin Tian. A few days ago, Lin Tian embarrassed him several times. After returning from the Valley of the Harp, he asked his master to help him cultivate. That was why he appeared in the Demon Sealing Gorge. After a few days of harsh cultivation, his strength had increased a lot. Coincidentally, he met Lin Tian at this time. His eyes immediately turned cold. How could he be willing to let Lin Tian leave? He wanted to teach Lin Tian a lesson. Lin Tian's face turned cold. He slapped forward. This slap was not light. It shook the air and made a buzzing sound. Ling Ye's face changed. Lin Tian had also become stronger. He was much stronger than when he was in the Valley of the Harp. This made his face turn gloomy. How could he know that Lin Tian had now stepped into the 4th layer of the Sea of Consciousness? Compared to when he was in the 3rd layer of the Sea of Consciousness, it was normal for his combat strength to become stronger. Bang! Ling Ye's punch was even more ruthless. His fist carried a thick true essence. The fist and palm collided, making a muffled sound like a drum. Lin Tian narrowed his eyes. He had fought with Ling Yi several times. At this time, he also found that Ling Yi was much stronger. At least, his physical strength had a very obvious improvement compared to before. He tilted his head and looked at the green-robed old man not far away. He immediately understood that this flying expert must have undergone extraordinary training for Ling Yi. Clang! The sound of the saber rang out, and a scorching airflow was generated. Ling Yi swung his treasured saber. A cold light flashed, and an old tree in the distance was split into 2. Lin Tian's eyes narrowed. With a wave of his right hand, the inner spirit sword appeared and slashed down diagonally. Now, after stepping into the 4th layer of the Sea of Consciousness, his battle prowess was much stronger than when he was in the 3rd layer of the Sea of Consciousness. After using the Azure Thunder Sword technique, the entire space was filled with the sound of swords. Ling Ye's expression was very cold. He was very unhappy with the fact that Lin Tian had become stronger. Falling moon! Ling Yi suddenly shouted. In an instant, Lin Tian felt a chill run down his spine. He saw densely packed energy sabers appearing like falling moons. With a clang, Lin Tian slashed out with his flaming thunder sword. Boom! The collision of the 2 powerful forces caused a hurricane to erupt. Pochin! Ling Yi shouted again. This slash was even more powerful than the falling moon, and it carried with it an extremely threatening stream of flames. Lin Tian clearly felt the pressure. He could tell that Ling Yi was using an airborne realm martial arts technique. He glanced behind him. The old man in the green robe stood still and could not see what was in front of him. So, his glabella gradually lit up. I haven't tested this move on a cultivator yet. Now is the time, he said coldly. In an instant, a lotus petal floated out from his glabella and slashed towards Ling Yi like a blade. Child's play! Ling Yi raised his hand and slashed down. However, the lotus petal went through the long blade and directly into his head. Ling Yi was shocked and immediately screamed. With a bang, he was sent flying. Lying on the ground, Ling Ye's body twitched. His eyes were bloodshot. He tore his hair like a madman. Not far away, the old man in the green robe stared at Ling Yi lying on the ground and frowned slightly. He did not see Lin Tian's attack just now. At this moment, he did not notice any wounds on Ling Ye's body. However, Ling Yi was lying on the ground and howling in pain. It looked like he had suffered an unimaginable injury. Lin Tian stared at Ling Yi, and a faint light flashed in his eyes. As expected, you can directly attack the sea of consciousness. After a dozen breaths, Ling Yi felt a little better and struggled to stand up. You! What did you do? Ling Yi roared angrily. Lin Tian glanced at Ling Yi coldly and then walked towards the burning sun sect. Ling Yi stared at Lin Tian's back. Anger surged in his eyes. He wanted to chase after him, but he only felt a sharp pain in his head. This sharp pain made his whole body feel a little numb. Even his vision was affected. He forced himself to endure it. Lin Tian jumped onto an old tree and jumped again, appearing dozens of feet away. Suddenly, the sound of something breaking through the air was heard. The old man in the green robe stood in front of him. Lin Tian's footsteps paused. His face suddenly darkened. Elder Tu, what is the meaning of this? The old man in the green robe did not say anything. He stared at Lin Tian for a moment, and then directly slammed his palm towards him. Lin Tian's expression changed. He suddenly felt a strong pressure. Damn it! Lin Tian cursed in his heart. He held up the Thunderfire sword and a majestic sword intent crazily surged out. The old man in the green robe narrowed his eyes. He still calmly slammed his palm forward, instantly shattering everything. Seeing this, Ling Yi was pleasantly surprised. He clenched his fists tightly. Facing the old man in the green robe, Lin Tian did not have the calmness he had when facing Ling Yi. He pushed the Thunderfire sword to the extreme and madly slashed at the old man in the green robe to resist the old man's seemingly ordinary but incomparably overbearing palm power. He thought that the old man in the green robe might attack him, but when it really came to this, he was still very angry. Clang! Following his anger, the Thunderfire sword became even more terrifying. Streaks of sword intent rushed towards the old man in the green robe. The old man in the green robe was moved. A strange light flashed in his eyes. He still slammed his right palm down. With a whoosh, the Thunderfire sword that Lin Tian slashed out was instantly shattered. Master, suppress him! Ling Yi laughed. The old man in the green robe glanced at Ling Yi, then his gaze fell on Lin Tian again. He slowly slammed his palm forward. What seemed to be a light palm suddenly produced a sky full of palm shadows. Lin Tian gripped the Heart Soul sword tightly. His eyes became even colder. Clang! The clanging of the sword continued. He directly used his strongest move, the Thunderfire sword, to slash apart the palm shadows. At the same time, his glabella lit up again. He was ready to use the White Lotus attack. At the moment, he could only rely on this move to take a gamble. He hoped that the White Lotus attack could create an opening for him, giving him a chance to escape. After all, he was facing a mighty one in the Zephyr Plane. There was no way he could fight back. His only option was to escape. At this moment, the old man in the green robe laughed. You're able to remain calm in the face of a mighty one in the Zephyr Plane. You're not bad, kid. You're just like your master back then. You have the same monstrous talent, and the same amazing talent. With a somewhat heroic laugh, the majestic aura on the old man in the green robe disappeared without a trace. Lin Tianwei was stunned and immediately frowned. In the distance, Ling Ye's expression also changed. The old man in the green robe looked at Lin Tian and said, "Don't think too much. I'm just testing your strength." "Testing my strength?" Lin Tianyi paused. You thought I was going to help my disciple suppress you." The old man in the green robe snorted and said, "I too am not that shameless. If you weren't Li Changfeng's disciple, I wouldn't even bother with you. It's just that I haven't seen Li Changfeng for many years. When I see his disciple, I can't help but miss you." The old man in the green robe was named Tumo. He was one of the 4 great elders of the Burning Sun sect. He was already 200 years old, and his cultivation was at the 3rd tier of the Zephyr Plane. He was very powerful. Lin Tian was speechless. Next to him, Ling Ye's expression changed. He stared at Lin Tian with some horror. "You're Li Changfeng's disciple?" Looking at Lin Tian again, Ling Ye's expression became very ugly. In the history of the Burning Sun sect, the most famous name was undoubtedly Li Changfeng. This name even overshadowed the founder of the Burning Sun sect. Lin Tian glanced at Ling Yi and was too lazy to pay attention to him. "What's wrong, kid? Are you unhappy with my disciple?" Tumo said. Lin Tian opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but in the end, he didn't say anything. As if he knew what Lin Tian was thinking, Tumo said, "I know that Ling Yi is a bit overbearing in the sect, but it doesn't mean anything. His overbearingness may make many people feel oppressed, but it also makes many disciples work hard to become stronger. Because when he bullies others, others want to bully them back. Isn't this a good thing?" Speaking of this, Tumo laughed loudly. "This is also a kind of motivation for others to work hard to cultivate." Lin Tian was speechless. He only felt that this old man was a bit silly. However, he had to admit that this old man's words did make sense. When people were bullied by others, they would become angry and want to bully them back. If they had such thoughts, they would naturally work hard to cultivate and become stronger. Only then would they have a chance to take revenge. "Oh right, your master, how is he now?" Tumo asked. "He drinks every day." Lin Tian andal. "Is that so? That kid still can't forget what happened back then. Since he left that year, 100 years have passed. In 100 years he hasn't come back even once. Even if he took in a disciple, he only sent a letter back to the sect." Tumo sighed. "He is probably afraid to see the Grand Elder." Lin Tian had already heard about an old drunkard's past from the Grand Elder. Thinking about it, he also felt a little sad. However, Master's cultivation hasn't fallen behind. "This is the only thing worth rejoicing about," he said. A bright light flashed in Tumo's eyes. He smiled and said, "I really hope to see that kid again." On the side, Ling Yi looked at Tumo and Lin Tian chatting together, and his face became more and more ugly. In the blink of an eye, Lin Tian and Tumo had chatted for an hour. After an hour, he bid farewell to Tumo and continued to head towards the Burning Sun sect. Looking at Lin Tian's back, Tumo smiled. "Disciple Ling Yi, your current cultivation is stronger than his, but your combat strength is weaker than his. You must work harder to cultivate. You must work extremely hard." Tu Bei smiled. When Lin Tian returned to the residence of the Burning Sun sect, the sky had already darkened. Vaguely, a few stars could be seen in the sky. Because he had constantly consumed his divine sense to experiment with the power of the White Lotus in the Demon Sealing Gorge, his essence, qi, and spirit were seriously exhausted, so at this time, he did not cultivate as usual, but lay down to rest. Soon, the darkness dissipated and the sky gradually brightened. When the morning sun fell, Lin Tian woke up and went directly to the Star River Tower to cultivate and hone his divine sense. In the blink of an eye, 2 days had passed. On this day, Lin Tian walked out of the Star River Tower. After resting for an hour, he was ready to go to the Demon Sealing Gorge to cultivate the White Lotus Sword technique. Because relatively speaking, the Azure Thunder Sword technique was a bit weak. Despite the addition of the flame power, it was not too strong. Now, he needed to master a set of flying greatsword techniques for daily combat. As for the weapon control technique, he wanted to use it as a trump card. Following a path, Lin Tian went straight to the demon ceiling gorge. Chapter 255. Reading on a mobile phone, several powerful figures arrived above the burning sun sect in an instant. Lin Tianyi saw two of them, Yi Jingshang of the Seven Mysteries Pavilion, and Su Yu of the Valley of the Harp. Looking at the other four people beside them, Lin Tianyi's heart sank. The four of them all exuded an aura similar to Bai Yunfei's. Clearly, they practiced the same technique, which caused Lin Tianyi's heart to sink. Please search product #bookyennet to see the most complete novel. They're from the 100 Refinements Workshop, he muttered to himself. The Zephyr Realm experts of the 100 Refinements Workshop had come to the Burning Sun sect. He vaguely guessed what was going on, and immediately felt an ominous feeling. At this time, the other disciples of the Burning Sun sect naturally saw this scene and were all surprised. 6 Zephyr Realm experts. Isn't that Elder Su Yu of the Valley of the Harp? There's also Elder Yi Jingshang of the Seven Mysteries Pavilion. The other 4, there's the owner of the 100 Refinements Workshop. What's going on? Everyone was shocked. What's the meaning of this? 5 figures walked out from the back mountain of the Burning Sun sect. The one in the lead was the master of the Burning Sun sect. Behind the master of the Burning Sun sect were 4 old men named Luo Yu, Tu Meng, Yan Xiu, and Zhao Hua. They were the 4 elders of the Burning Sun sect. Staring at the 6 figures in front of them, the faces of the leaders of the Burning Sun sect were somewhat cold. Intruding into the Burning Sun sect like this could be said to be looking down on the Burning Sun sect. Headmasterly, please don't take offense. Of the 6 figures, the master of the 100 Refinements Workshop stood out and got straight to the point. Not long ago, I heard that a disciple of your sect killed the grandson of Elder Mu Hong of the 100 Refinements Workshop. Afterwards, Elder Mu Hong's disciple, Bai Yunfei, came to the Burning Sun sect to seek justice. It was also at that time that Bai Yunfei discovered another matter. Your disciple had secretly learned the 100 Refinements secret technique of the 100 Refinements Workshop. I believe that Headmasterly should know what this means, right? I have come this time because I hope that Sect Masterly will hand that disciple over to my 100 Refinements Workshop. In the distance, when Lin Tian heard these words, his face immediately turned cold. As expected, they were coming for him. Yu Wushuang said that the 100 Refinements Square wouldn't let him go easily, but he didn't expect that the other party would directly kill their way into the Burning Sun sect. This, Master Balian, the elders of this sect have come to ask for him personally? There is also an elder from the Seven Profound Pavilion and an elder from the Valley of the Harp. Are they supporting the 100 Refinements Workshop? Many disciples of the Burning Sun sect were moved. Sect Master Ge, when did your 100 Refinements Workshop's strongest secret technique become so easy to steal? A Sea of Consciousness cultivator can steal the 100 Refinements secret technique from your 100 Refinements Workshop. Your 100 Refinements Workshop doesn't seem to be that weak, right? The Burning Sun sect master's face darkened. No one in my Burning Sun sect has cultivated the 100 Refinements secret technique. You may all return. The 100 Refinements Workshop master narrowed his eyes. Although the 100 Refinements Workshop is heavily guarded, it is difficult to guard against a villain. Sect Masterly, this matter concerns the strongest secret technique of a large sect. Please don't be too protective of your disciple. This isn't a good thing. Yi Jingshang opened his mouth. Not long ago, this Yi's disciple returned from the Valley of the Harp and explained the strange matter he discovered in the Valley of the Harp. There is someone in the Burning Sun sect who knows the 100 Refinements secret technique. This old woman saw this matter with her own eyes. That evil creature controlled 15 treasures at the same time and injured this old woman's disciple. It is indeed the 100 Refinements secret technique of the 100 Refinements Workshop. Su Yu coldly said, Sect Masterly, you should hand over that evil creature. Don't destroy the harmony of the 4 great sects for a lowlife. In the distance, Lin Tian's face turned cold. Bastard. At the same time, another voice sounded. Tu Miao unhappily said, Who are you calling lowlife? You old witch are the one who is lowlife. Looking at your wrinkled face and sinister eyes, this old woman thought she saw a ghost. Saying this, Tu Miao curled her lips with a disdainful expression. Her ridicule could not be more obvious. What did you say? Su Yu was instantly furious. Tu Miao sneered. I'm calling you a sinister woman. No, a sinister old witch. Su Yu was furious. She soared into the sky as she glared at Tu Miao. Sect Masterly, please hand that person over to the 100 Refinements Workshop. The 100 Refinements Workshop will thank you. The 100 Refinements Workshop Master said. The Burning Sun Sect Master's expression was cold. The strongest secret technique of the 100 Refinements Workshop, not to mention the people of other sects, even most of the people in the 100 Refinements Workshop can't cultivate it. Let me ask you, how can my Burning Sun Sect's disciple obtain the 100 Refinements secret technique? Let me give you a piece of advice. After living for so long, don't be too shameless. Please return. The 100 Refinements Workshop Master still narrowed his eyes, his expression not changing. Sect Masterly, do you want to take the strongest secret technique of the 100 Refinements Workshop? A person from the 100 Refinements Workshop coldly said. This person was called Luo Gao. His cultivation was at Zephyr Tier 3 and he was an elder of the 100 Refinements Workshop. What a joke! The Burning Sun Sect Master's expression turned even colder. You saw someone use a technique similar to the 100 Refinements secret technique, so you insist that it's a martial technique of the 100 Refinements Workshop and want to take it away. Do you really think that the people of the Burning Sun Sect are fools? I'll say it again. Don't be too shameless. Please return. Luo Gao's expression immediately darkened, becoming slightly cold. Since Sect Masterly insists on protecting the thief who stole the secret technique of the 100 Refinements Workshop, then we can only take it by force. The 100 Refinements Workshop Master said. You can try. The Burning Sun Sect Master coldly said. At the same time, the 4 elders behind the Burning Sun Sect Master emitted a cold aura. Seeing this scene, the expressions of some of the disciples of the Burning Sun Sect changed drastically. Are they going to fight? They're all Zephyr Tier powerhouses. Many people were shocked. The destructive power of a battle between Zephyr Tier powerhouses was very terrifying. Many people could not help but retreat into the distance. On the side of the 100 Refinements Workshop, an elder said, Spread out your divine sense and find that little bastard first. Found him. Almost in an instant, Yi Jingshang spoke. The divine sense of a Zephyr Tier powerhouse was very amazing. With just a sweep, Yi Jingshang found Lin Tian's location. In a flash, he flashed in front of Lin Tian and raised his hand to grab him. Lin Tian's expression changed slightly, and he quickly retreated. Yi Jingshang sneered and the speed of his attack increased. Get lost! A cold voice sounded. Luo Yu appeared in front of Lin Tian in a flash and slapped out with his palm. The 2 Zephyr Tier powerhouses collided. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew, shattering several old trees nearby. Yi Jingshang was blasted away, and Luo Yu also retreated a few steps. Thank you, Elder Luo. Lin Tian stepped forward to thank him. It was a little dangerous just now. He did not expect Yi Jingshang to rush towards him in an instant. His speed was too fast. Luo Yu waved his hand and said with a smile, No problem, it's what I should do. As he said that, Luo Yu looked at Yi Jingshang opposite him. Does the 7 Mysteries Pavilion Master know that you're involved in this mess? Helping the 100 Refinements Workshop take back the stolen secret method. The Pavilion Master will support my actions, Yi Jingshang said indifferently. In that case, you're acting on your own. The 100 Refinements Workshop has given you a lot of benefits, right? Luo Yu said. Yi Jingshang's eyes narrowed. I don't understand what you're talking about. Luo Yu shook his head. Hypocrite. Hypocrite, blind, and shameless. He's just such a person. Lin Tian continued Luo Yu's words at this time, saying, Back then, he fancied a treasured disciple in the Northern Flame Imperial City and wanted to recruit him to the Seven Mysteries Pavilion. In the end, that person relied on the fact that he was fancied by the sect and did whatever he wanted. In order to steal my treasured medicine, he provoked me. In the end, he was defeated by me with a few steps between us. In the end, he even died at my hands. At that time, he wanted to kill me, but unfortunately, he did not succeed. In the Valley of the Harp, his other treasured disciple, the Seven Mysteries Pavilion's Di Wahom, was also crushed by me with a distance of 2 steps between us. He must have felt even more uncomfortable in his heart because it was too embarrassing, right? Naturally, his desire to kill me increased a little. As he said that, he looked at Yijingshang. Am I right, Signori? He enunciated the word, senior, especially loudly, and the sarcasm was very thick. What? This guy crushed the Seven Mysteries Pavilion's Di Wahong with a distance of 2 steps between us? That Di Wahong is a core disciple of the Seven Mysteries Pavilion. Hearing Lin Tian's words, many of the Burning Sun sect's disciples' expressions changed, and their eyes widened. Luo Yu looked at Yijingshang. There's such a thing? It was unknown whether Luo Yu asked this on purpose or not, but in short, Yijingshang's face became completely gloomy. Ha 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 ha, as expected of that brat's disciple, he's really strong. Tu Qing laughed loudly. This laughter was undoubtedly very ear-piercing to Yijingshang's ears. What a sharp-tongued junior! Everyone take him down! The 100 Refinements Lane Master said. Whoosh! 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 All of a sudden, all the flight powerhouses, including the owner of the 100 Refinements District, charged toward Lin Tian. Little bastard! Su Yu's eyes were sinister, and her cheeks were ice-cold. It was also at this time that a cold snort sounded. What kind of place do you think my Burning Sun sect is? Do you think you can just barge in as you wish? The Burning Sun sect master yelled. As his words fell, the entire Burning Sun sect shook with a boom. In an instant, runes appeared in every corner of the Burning Sun sect. Then, dazzling beams of light shot up. Each beam of light was filled with boundless murderous intent. Great Mountain Protection Array! A Burning Sun sect disciple cried out in surprise. Lin Tian was a little surprised. He glanced around, and his heart couldn't help but freeze. He was an array manipulator himself, and at the 4th rank. Naturally, he could sense the terror of this great array. Although it was only a 6th rank killing array, there was more than one engraved. It seemed like there were 5 or 6 of them gathered together, and it was very terrifying. A group of shameless old things. Today, I'll have to give you a good beating, Tu Qing said coldly. At this time, the leaders of the Burning Sun sect all had unfriendly expressions. However, in the midst of such a terrifying killing array, the people of the 100 Refinements Lane appeared very calm. Beat us? I'm afraid that's impossible, the 100 Refinements Lane Master said indifferently. As his words fell, the Burning Sun sect shook again. The killing light that rushed up from the ground was instantly shattered, and some of the runes that were originally lit dimmed instantly. The Burning Sun sect Master and the others all had a change of expression. What's going on? The Burning Sun sect's Great Mountain Protection Array actually failed. Sect Master! In the distance, a deacon of the Burning Sun sect, covered in blood, staggered over. The array core runes of the Great Array have been destroyed. Deacons Wu, Xian and Ling, pft. A sword ray flew from behind, cutting off the deacon's head. Chapter 256. Looking at the 3 and the swords in their hands, Lin Tianyi instantly guessed something. No pop-up window. The destruction of the Great Formation was definitely related to these 3. Zhushang, Chu Xian, Ling Yi, what are you doing? The Burning Sun sect master's face was ashen. At this moment, everyone from the Burning Sun sect paled. On the other hand, the people from 100 Refinements Workshop were indifferent. Clearly, everything was under their control. Zhushang and the other 2 retreated behind the people from 100 Refinements Workshop. Zhushang said, Sorry, Sect Master. We were forced to do this. Zhuishang stared at Lin Tian and gritted his teeth. If he doesn't die, he will definitely kill us in the future. We only temporarily destroyed the core of the Great Formation. Everything was for self-preservation. Moreover, Owner Ge promised us that we could enter 100 Refinement's workshop to cultivate and give us many treasures. This is much better than staying in the Burning Sun sect. What did you say? The elders of the Burning Sun sect were furious. Tu Miao clenched his fists and glared behind the people from 100 Refinement's workshop. Ling Yi, how dare you! A few days ago, he had begged him to bring a disciple to cultivate. A disciple he had taught for more than a year was now a traitor of the sect. Ling Ye's face was gloomy. A few days ago, after learning that Lin Tian was Li Changfeng's disciple, his expression had been unsightly. After Zhuishang and Chu Xian discovered this, they secretly came looking for him. At that time, Zhuishang and Chu Xian had already been bribed by 100 Refinement's workshop. When the two learned that Ling Yi and Lin Tian did not get along, they instigated Ling Yi to kill Lin Tian. When Ling Yi thought of Li Changfeng standing behind Lin Tian, of Lin Tian's strength, and of the generous conditions offered by 100 Refinement's workshop, he immediately agreed. Thus, on this day, when the protective formation was activated, the three of them worked together to destroy the core of the Great Formation. This was the only thing that 100 Refinement's workshop had asked them to do. As long as there was no mountain protecting array, the 100 Refinement's workshop had a 100% chance of taking Lin Tian away. He is Li Changfeng's disciple. You will definitely protect him with all your strength. With his personality, he will definitely kill me in the future. You won't do anything about it. Maybe you will even help him. Ling Yi looked at Tu Meng and said, just like a few days ago, he hurt me, but you didn't help me at all. You even smiled at him. You don't have a disciple like me in your heart. In your heart, he is more important because he is Li Changfeng's disciple. Bastard! You were the one who made the first move. If you lose, then you lose. How can you ask Master to help you vent your anger? Tu Miao's face was full of anger. Didn't I tell you to cultivate harder? When you're stronger, you can beat him yourself. I wanted to ask the sect for assembled gods bow down for you, but I didn't expect you to betray the sect like this. Whatever you say, Ling Yi said coldly. Tu Ming's old face was extremely unsightly. His whole body was trembling. Evil disciple! Evil disciple! I, Tu Miao, have lived an honest and upright life, but I actually taught such a disciple. I have let down the sect. At this moment, Tu Miao seemed to have aged a lot in an instant. You may know a person for a long time without understanding his true nature. Elder Tu, you don't have to be like this, the Burning Sun sect master said. Although he said this, the Burning Sun sect master's expression was also very unsightly. His eyes were very cold. There was nothing more infuriating than being bitten by a core disciple that his sect had carefully nurtured. The 100 Refinement's district master stared at the Burning Sun sect master and said, Sect Masterly, it's better to hand that person over. Don't hurt our friendship. You destroyed my sect's protective mountain array, and now you're saying don't hurt our friendship? The Burning Sun sect master's face was cold. If you had handed him over from the beginning, how would things have turned out like this? The 100 Refinement's district master shook his head and said, No matter what, the 100 Refinement's secret technique is the foundation of our 100 Refinement's district. It can't fall into the hands of others. Today, our 100 Refinement's district must take this disciple of your sect away. Then give it a try, the Burning Sun sect master said coldly. With a boom, powerful spiritual ether seeped out of his body, and the entire space became scorching hot. It seems that we can only take him by force, the 100 Refinement's district master said. As soon as the 100 Refinement's district master's words fell, several other figures suddenly moved, including Yi Jingshang of the Seven Mysteries Pavilion, and Su Yu of the Valley of the Harp, all pressed towards Lin Tian, wanting to capture Lin Tian. The Burning Sun sect master slashed out with his sword and stopped the 100 Refinement's district master. Today you can't protect him, the 100 Refinement's district master said. I'll protect him for you to see. the Burning Sun Sect Master said. The two airborne realm fighters, the masters of the two sects, took to the air and clashed with each other. Almost at the same time, Luo Yu of the Burning Sun Sect stopped Yijingshang. Yan Xiu and Zhao Hu blocked Luo Gao and another elder of the 100 Refinements district respectively. Tu Qiong blocked Suyu of the Valley of the Harp. It seems that you're not doing a good job as a master. Even your disciple has betrayed you. Suyu sneered. Tu Qiong was still brooding over this matter. When he heard this, he immediately became furious. You're courting death! Boom! The two of them fought, and a murderous aura suddenly spread in all directions. At this time, all the disciples of the Burning Sun Sect were stunned. They were shocked by this scene. Run! Get back! Go to the Demon Sealing Gorge! Someone shouted. Suddenly, all the ordinary disciples of the Burning Sun Sect retreated towards the Demon Sealing Gorge, fearing that they would be affected by the battle. After all, there were 10 airborne realm powerhouses. The impact of these 10 people fighting together was too terrifying. Lin Tian stared at the sky, clenching his fists tightly. Then, his cold gaze swept towards Wushang and the other two. If these three had not destroyed the core of the Burning Sun Sect's mountain protecting formation, the Burning Sun Sect Master and the others would not have fallen into a bitter battle. Little B****. At this time, a cold snort was heard. In the distance, another elder of the 100 Refinements district, Mu Hong, was approaching Lin Tian. Suddenly, Lin Tianji felt a mountain-like weight on his body, causing his heart to sink. A few juniors want to start a war between the sects? An old voice was heard. At the back mountain of the Burning Sun Sect, a white-haired old man stepped on the void and walked over. Supreme Elder! The disciples of the Burning Sun Sect were pleasantly surprised. As the Supreme Elder of the Burning Sun Sect walked out, the entire space shook, causing the Master of the 100 Refinements district and the others to be shocked. A powerhouse of the 9th heaven of the levitating realm is indeed terrifying, the Master of the 100 Refinements district said. Even so, the Master of the 100 Refinements district's expression was still very calm. At this time, another old man silently appeared in the distance. He wore a purple robe and walked towards the Supreme Elder of the Burning Sun Sect. I just want to take back my 100 Refinements district's secret technique. I don't mean to start a war between the sections. The Supreme Elder of the 100 Refinements district. You guys are really well prepared. Even an old fart like you came. The Supreme Elder of the Burning Sun Sect's face darkened. The Burning Sun Sect has you overseeing it. If I didn't come, wouldn't they be defeated in an instant? The Supreme Elder of the 100 Refinements district said. After all, we are of the same generation. Old friend, you should hand over that disciple called Lin Tian. Don't destroy the friendly relationship between our two sects because of a mere intersect disciple. I don't remember being friends with you. Doing such a thing, let alone the word friendly. The Supreme Elder of the Burning Sun Sect said. The Supreme Elder of the 100 Refinements district narrowed his eyes. So, old friend, you don't want to? The Supreme Elder of the Burning Sun Sect stared at the opposite side and calmly shouted. All deacons and elders of the Burning Sun Sect, listen to my order. Protect Lin Tian at all costs. 100 years ago, the Supreme Elder of the Burning Sun Sect had always blamed himself for driving away the most talented man in the sect. Now that that man had sent back a disciple, he must protect him well. The Supreme Elder of the 100 Refinements district narrowed his eyes. Protect him at all costs? Unfortunately, you can't do it. Without the protective mountain formation, our battle prowess is clearly stronger than yours. All of your resistance will be futile. Who knows if you don't try? The Supreme Elder of the Burning Sun Sect said. Instantly, the two of them restrained each other and rushed to a higher place in the sky. Lin Tian stared at the sky while feeling very grateful in his heart. Because these people were fighting for his sake. A cold aura pressed down from the front. Mu Hong's expression was incomparably cold, and his aura was like a knife. You killed my grandson. I should kill you directly, but before that, there are many things I need to know from you, so I'll cripple your limbs first. Lin Tian stared at Mu Hong. Although his back was slightly cold, he didn't retreat. He stood in place like a monument and looked coldly at Mu Hong. You trash grandson of trash, you deserve to die. But then again, I really regret it because I should have killed him with my own hands. Letting him poison himself to death is too easy for him. Staring at Mu Hong, he wasn't afraid at all, and his voice was very cold. Mu Hong's expression suddenly became gloomy, and his killing intent wandered. You're courting death, Mu Hong said coldly. Lin Tian disdainfully said, You're talking as if you're not going to kill me after capturing me, idiot. In terms of combat strength, he was far from being Mu Hong's opponent, but he didn't want to lose in words. Even if he couldn't beat him, he had to feel comfortable scolding him. Mu Hong's expression became even colder, as if he knew that he couldn't win against Lin Tian. He stopped talking and walked forward step by step. Lin Tian, retreat to the Demon Ceiling Gorge. There's a more hidden passage there. Leave with Deacon Lu. Go quickly. With Puan as the leader, several deacons blocked in front of Lin Tian. At the same time, another person came from the side. It was Deacon Lu. He pulled Lin Tian and prepared to retreat. I'm not going. Lin Tian stared ahead, not moving at all. Deacon Lu said anxiously, What are you saying? You're still too young. You can't stop Zephyr powerhouses. You're only in the spiritual sea realm. The Grand Elder ordered us to protect you. They're buying time for you. I'll take you away. Deacon Lu said, They're coming for you. Only if you leave, this battle might end directly. Go quickly. Impossible. Lin Tian shook his head and stared straight ahead. In order to protect him, the Burning Sun sect master and others were fighting with the people of 100 Refinements Workshop. How could he leave? Go quickly. Puan shouted. Seeing Mu Hong closing in, Puan and several others rushed up together. You want to stop me with just you? Mu Hong waved his hand, and a gust of wind rolled up palm shadows all over the sky. Puan and the others were all blown away in an instant. Puan and the others were sent flying, each of them coughing up blood. After being hit by a palm from an airborne realm powerhouse, each of them had a lot of bones broken. They looked a little embarrassed, and it was difficult for them to stand up again. Mu Hong came close and raised his hand to grab Lin Tian. Go! Deacon Lu said and waved his fist forward to block. You're courting death. Mu Hong's eyes were cold. Seeing that Deacon Lu's fist was about to collide with Mu Hong's big hand, Lin Tian stretched out his left hand and pulled Deacon Lu back. Although Deacon Lu was older than him, his cultivation was only at the 3rd level of the Sea of Consciousness, which was much weaker than him. If he were to meet Mu Hong's palm, he would definitely suffer unimaginable damage. Lin Tian, you? Deacon Lu was slightly shocked. Lin Tian's face was solemn, but he didn't say anything. He pulled Deacon Lu back with his left hand, and the Heart Spirit Sword appeared in his right hand. With a clang, he directly used the Thunderfire Sword to the limit. A bright sword aura slashed out, shaking the air. Deacon Lu was moved. This sword was indeed a little terrifying. Mu Hong's eyes flickered. Obviously, he didn't expect that a cultivator at the 4th level of the Sea of Consciousness could slash out such a terrifying sword. However, he was only surprised for a moment. After that, the big hand he stretched out did not change direction. With a slight shake, it shattered Lin Tian's sword aura. Although a firefly is occasionally bright, it is still a firefly in the end. How can it compete with the bright moon? With a cold voice, Mu Hong slapped Lin Tian with his palm. End of chapter. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.